Seekest thou the road to all that's foul and fair? Gather, sisters, fire, water, darkness, and fire. Burn and glory shall be thine. Down, down, down the witch's road. Down, down, down the witch's road. Down, 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 down the witch's road.
Salutations, ghouls and freaks. Welcome to this podcast, The Storm, where insane slashers, undead dringers, and all around crooked beans convert to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my host, the Mage of Madness, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Good evening, everyone. If the song didn't cue you in, and I assume we'll use the second half of it next week, but if the song didn't cue you in, we're doing a mostly witch-themed week this week.
Yeah, and I'm your
Because
host slash Scarecrow impersonator, the Brainstorm Pop Culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am doing mostly okay. As I was telling Brainstormer before we went live, I spent most of the day playing a game on my phone and completely lost track of time. I looked up the clock at about 7:30 and realized, oh shit, I've got shit I need to do in like 10 minutes. Oh.
Well, yesterday I recently, mostly it's just a scratchy throat. That's about it. Nothing really else in terms of sick. I also started watching a show on Hulu called Fright Creek. No, was it Fright Creeky? Basically, it's set in New Orleans. It's about these kids who are getting blessed by the Loa to fight this demon that feeds on fear and is trying to cause enough chaos to gain a lot of power.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's very rooted in hoodoo and voodoo religion and mythology and stuff. It's really cool.
I am genuinely curious about that now. I might have to look into that after.
Yeah, it's got two seasons. It's actually made by DreamWorks, so.
Okay, that's neat. So it's animated, Ben?
Yep.
That's also neat.
But yeah, I also kind of cut the song short because, well, it was a 3-minute song.
Mm-hmm.
So,
like I said, we can probably just use the second half of it next week.
just waiting for the article to load. Yeah, I started watching that today, actually. I was just bored, and I kind of flew through the episodes, I'm not going to lie. Up until, like, 7, I stopped watching. So I got, like, halfway through the season already.
And I believe we have 2 more weeks of October left. Next week and the week after.
It's the 19th, so.
Okay, so.
Wow.
The month went by quickly.
Yeah, I gotta start hanging on my decorations. I probably should have done that at the beginning of the month, but I just kind of forgot.
We'll still have 1 week in November though, because Agatha all along is ending literally on Halloween night. Its two-part finale is going to be released on Halloween night. And if we want to review Agatha All Along, and we do, we will have to wait until after the night of Halloween in order to watch the whole thing and to judge it accordingly. Long story short, I think that episodes 1, 4, and 6 are the weakest ones. I think, however, I think there's only one bad episode of it so far, and that's episode 6. Episode 6 was awful. But episodes 2, 3, and 5 were really good, and hopefully we'll get more good episodes and fewer mid to bad episodes as the show goes on and wraps up. Hopefully. Anyway, on to the first article of tonight.
Right. Hold on. For some reason,
Your computer crapping out again?
no, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
Venezuela recognizes fiery ritual honoring goddess as cultural heritage. This is by Reuters.com. This was written by Efrain Otero. Again, if I say names wrong, I'm so sorry.
He struggles at basic English sometimes, folks. It's nothing personal.
Okay, blame the American education system. Okay, they barely taught us shit.
Yep. The only reason I know half the shit that I know is because I study things independently of school.
Yeah, and this was written October 14th, 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Quibayo, Venezuela, October 14th. Hundreds of bare-chest men circle flames on a dark night to beat the drums in central Venezuela's mountains. Dash across the blaze with bare feet over hot coals. Even more daring souls beat themselves with the burning wood, while others pour alcohol over their backs.
I mean, that is some serious devotion, goddammit.
In a nearby river, families cleanse themselves to welcome the spirits of the dead and smoke tobacco.
That also makes sense, considering that tobacco originally was a sacred plant for most of the natives of North and South America. It kind of flummoxes me that we turned something that's supposed to be like a sacred incense into a source of addiction. I'm not saying noble savage mythology or anything, but it does sometimes vex me how we can turn something that's supposed to be highly spiritual into a pathological addiction because of the way we choose to engage with it. Wah, wah, wah. Anyway, moving on.
Right. The religious ritual known as... Oh, wait, no, hold on. Did I read this one? In a nearby river, families cleanse themselves to welcome the spirits of the dead and smoke tobacco.
You did. That was
okay.
What we were just, or what I was just responding to.
Okay, I was just checking. The religious ritual known as Ballet en Candela, I believe that's how you say it. Again, I don't speak Spanish, despite my Hispanic heritage. I don't speak it. Or candle dance was recognized by Venezuela's government late last week as part of the South American nation's cultural heritage ahead of festivals over the weekend.
It certainly is interesting that they have that. And yet another example of how harvest festivals and shite are as old as the hills, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on, though.
The ceremony pays tribute to Venezuela's indigenous ancestors who performed such rituals, said Richard Perez, head of the Venezuelan Association of Spiritualism. Not just for rain, but for the harvest, imbuing themselves with the candle that was, for them, the sun god.
Interesting.
The devotional dance now honors the goddess Maria Lenosa, whose following began in the early 1900s out of a combination of indigenous, Catholic, and African beliefs.
Yep. Again, the cross pollination of cultures is definitely a thing. Moving along, though.
All right. If there's a religious and spiritual manifestation born in Venezuela, it's this one, said Cultural Minister Ernesto Villegas in a statement. The mix of beliefs gives a face to Venezuelanness.
I mean, I'm sure it does. Although, small proviso here, that mixture of native beliefs, Catholic beliefs, and the like medieval remnants of pagan beliefs is definitely not unique to Venezuela, because most of the forms of folk magic practiced all through the Americas are some combination of pre-existing pagan, Catholic, African, and native beliefs. Like almost every American form of folk magic can claim to have some mixture of those four things. Although that doesn't mean they're not unique, because of course the regional variation on this is also quite extensive. You've got Appalachian folk magic, or granny magic as it's sometimes called. You've got conjure, you've got hoodoo, you've got at least some variation on voodoo, even though voodoo is more of a, I guess the best way of putting it is a more consistent and self-contained religion that, while it has crossover with all the other forms of folk magic and so on, it is, a distinct entity unto itself. Then, of course, you've got powwow or hex magic in the Pennsylvania Dutch country, and so you could literally make a series of documentaries just on regional variations on folk magic, and I'm not even getting into like root work and stuff like that. But anyway, moving on.
If there are that a statue of Maria Lenosa looked on as the Villegas declared her celebration a cultural heritage in the mountain town of Cuiabao, around 350 kilometers west of the capital, Caracas. The goddess of nature, love, peace, and harmony is depicted riding a tapir, and holding up a female pelvis to represent fertility. Yet the dance goes even deeper. Venezuela's indigenous ancestors walked over these embers to be imbued with the sun god to fight against the white man, Perez said at the event, referring to opposition at the hands of the area's former colonial masters. Wouldn't that be the Spanish?
Yeah, and I
Although,
thought we
to
were
be
gonna
fair,
get through an article without any social justice based revisionism, but apparently
I don't
not.
know if that's. I mean, to be fair, back then I think they just called anyone that would be colonizing any place a white man. Given, I don't know, like
The differences in skin tone, etc. But here's the reason I point this out is because I doubt that has much to do with the actual folk beliefs. I think that's a piece of editorializing by the person who wrote the article.
no, that
I
was
was
actually said by Perez. not the writer, the head of Venezuelan Association of Spiritualism.
I still don't know how much of that is modern revisionism, because I severely doubt that there was much of that in the original beliefs. I think this is a case of looking for a political reason for doing beliefs for no other reason than because you think there should be one. And in actuality, most beliefs exist because people believe in them, i.e., they think those beliefs are true. It has very little in the way of political demonstration. And mind you, Venezuela is it's stuck between being a modern civilization and not being one. So I wonder how much of that is academic woo leaching into the original beliefs. Also, I was gonna let this particular point lapse because I'm sure in some ways that that the being that the rituals are done for is probably at least partially considered a goddess. The fact that
It was said.
the fact that her name is Maria probably means that there was some Catholic sanctifying going on there, as with a lot of the old like Mayan and Incan and so forth deities. A lot of them were turned into saints to make the lives of the Christian converts easier. So I'm not sure how much a native Venezuelan would agree that she's a goddess, or they wouldn't, because with South American entities particularly, the line between saint and goddess or god got very blurry, especially during the conquistador period. Moving on.
All right. Hold on. This is from AmericanGreatness.com. Critical Witchcraft Theory. Written by Peter Wood, published July 23rd, 2021.
And yes, this does make every fiber of my being scream in outrage. If anyone was asking. Because this is, these are my beliefs, and you don't get to tack a bastardized neo-Hegelian Frankfurt School bullshit onto my beliefs and not make me irately pissed. Critical theory is a clusterfuck in and of itself, and we would much be better off if Hegel and Hegel's inheritors never developed critical theory in the fucking first place. It is a farce that ruins everything it touches. But the fact that they are trying to academically co-opt witchcraft makes me want to burn things to the ground. Moving on.
Subheader is systemic racism is not a sociology theory. It is a theology. More precisely, it is a demonology, a theory of witchcraft.
I mean, I'm not sure where this article is going to go, whether it's going to be on the side of critical witchcraft theory or if it's going to be against it. Because with the subtitle like that, it could honestly go either way. Because referring to structural racism as a theology might be the kind of thing someone would say in order to diminish and decry it, or it might be trying to elevate the idea of structural racism to the level of theology and therefore make it unquestionable. But as it relates to the topic of witchcraft, fuck you, no. There was nothing racist about the witch trials. Ever. None. Niet. Nil point. The witch trials occurred all throughout Europe, and your ethnicity had next to nothing to do with anything. You morons. But anyway, moving on.
All right. It was good enough for William Stutton in 1692. Stutton was the Chief Justice who presided over the Salem witchcraft trials that sent 20 people to their deaths. What was good enough for Stutton was spectral evidence, which referred to the testimony of witnesses as to what they had seen in their dreams. If a witness said that he dreamed of a neighbor engaging in witchcraft, Stutton's court admitted that is evidence against the neighbor.
Yes, spectral evidence was a thing that the church and the legal system considered back then, especially when it came to supernatural crimes, which, witchcraft ostensibly was. Yes, that is complete bullshit. No, it has nothing to do with racism or sexism or gendered bullshit or oppression or anything other than the universal oppression of misanthropy, because everyone was potentially a victim of the witchcraft trials. There's also the niggling little detail here that there were actual people who practiced the folk beliefs that broadly got grouped under the heading of witchcraft. Wise women and cunning folk were definitely a thing, so the actual phenomena of the village witch was definitely a thing. We need to get out of this elementary school level understanding where witch trials only happened because people were paranoid and no one who was ever accused ever did anything that could be called witchcraft. It is simply not the case. It was the case in the latter part of the trials after the hysteria had gotten to such a point that people no longer cared whether there was a reasonable likelihood that someone was a practitioner or not. But the witch trials always started, or at least most often started, with people who at least arguably could have been people who had knowledge of folk magic, which is usually recontextualized as witchcraft by people who are looking for witchcraft. Now, mind you, that those connections could be strenuous at best, which is why very often midwives or folk healers were accused, because the logic went, if you know what herbs and lotions and oils and things can be good for someone and help them heal, you would also, in theory at least, have knowledge of what herbs and things could do harm as well. Anyway, moving on.
Not everyone in the 17th century Massachusetts thought it was a good idea. Cotton Mather, the colony's leading theologian, thought spectral evidence was useful but insufficient. Cotton Mather's father, Increase Mather, the president of Harvard, thought spectral evidence was untrustworthy as it might have been planted by demons. Took the royal governor, William Phipps, to outlaw spectral evidence altogether in legal proceedings. But that ruling, of course, couldn't banish the readiness of people to believe accusations supported by no shred of real evidence. Contemporary Americans tend to scoff at the credulousness of those Puritans in Salem who leveled deadly accusations based on the phantoms of their own imaginations. But here we are in the age of critical race theory, still doing it. Okay.
I mean, again, I'm not sure whether the person writing this article is in favor of critical theory of any kind or not. Because insofar as the idea of a witch hunt is something that is completely erroneous, I don't know what you're referring to that is the modern day equivalent of witch hunts. The only way I could think to interpret that sentence is if someone is opposed to critical theory, then they would be also opposed to the idea of deplatforming and cancellation, and therefore deplatforming and cancellation is a witch hunt. But I suspect we might be dealing with someone who does believe that critical race theory didn't do nothing, i.e., didn't do anything wrong, and that people getting mad about critical theory of any kind or critical race theory means that they are the witch hunters in this scenario, which is just stupid. Critical theory is an entire body of work, whether it's critical race theory, critical queer theory, critical witchcraft theory, which no, I'm still not okay with you doing, etc. Critical theory in and of itself is always bad because it is based on Hegel's dialectical view of history, and Hegel's dialectical view of history was always a post hoc rationalization that bore no resemblance whatsoever to actual historical precedent. Hegel's theory of history essentially goes that in every given example of a historical event, there is always a thesis and an antithesis, and the conflict of those two things that results in what's known as a synthesis. The problem is this reduces pretty much every historical event down to conflict, which is erroneous in and of itself, and it also relies on the discretion of the theorizer to determine what the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis ought to be. Not to mention, it is a framework that entirely lionizes the possibility of false dichotomies. The entire Hegelian framework relies on things being almost universally dichotomous, and it's not the case. And every time a Hegelian dichotomy rears its ugly head, whether it's the Aryans and the Untermenschen of Nazi fame, whether it's the proletariat and bourgeoisie of Marxist thinking, whether it's the men and women or males and females of feminist imagining, etc. Every time a Hegelian dichotomy is used, it is almost invariably a false one that is reliant on post hoc rationalization and post hoc oversimplification of historical factors. It has never done anything good, and it is both directly and indirectly responsible for some of the worst crimes that have ever been perpetrated against humanity in the last 300 or 400 years. Between Hegel and Rousseau, those two men are probably the most indirectly bloodstained people in human history. Because if there was no Hegel and no Rousseau, there would not have been Nazis. There would not have been a Frankfurt School. There would not have been postmodernism or post-structuralism. There would not have been the communist framework of various, Marxist frames and so on. Everything that, almost all the mass destruction of human life, almost all of the tyranny, almost all of the torture of the last 200 or 300 years is either directly or indirectly tied into Hegelianism, neo-Hegelianism, or Marxism, which frankly is just economic Hegelianism. And that's why I don't like using the word Marxist, not because, I have any liking towards Marx or anything, but because I feel it erroneous to give Marx that much credit. All he did was take the Hegelian dialectic and swap out thesis and antithesis for bourgeoisie and proletariat, and swap out synthesis for communism. That's basically a surface level difference and nothing the fuck else. Moving on, though.
CRT is based on the claim that an insidious, pervasive, but invisible force inhabits all Americans and American institutions. This invisible force exists outside the conscious experience of those who harbor it. Those purveyors of a systemic racism are its hapless servants who believe in their own innocence, as much as poor Sarah Good did when she got her chance to testify at the Salem trials. I'm no more a witch than you are a wizard. If you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink. said Sarah when found guilty, the detail around which Nathaniel Hawthorne constructed the House of the Seven Gables.
Okay, so this paragraph basically narrows down whether it's a pro-critical theory article or anti-critical theory article. I'm happy to see that it is a anti-critical theory article because, as I just mentioned, the Hegelian framework or offshoots of the Hegelian framework have been responsible for some of the stupidest, most counterproductive, and straight up most tragic crimes against humanity in the last 200 or 300 years. The problem is that in making this point and sticking it to critical theory, which is an admirable goal, you went and made yourself a historical, which is a problem given that the one thing we can both criticize critical theory for is being post hoc ahistorical rationalization of things that were more complicated or more nuanced than that. But point being, the Salem witch trials is a actually rather unique example of the witch hysteria because it was at a time where pretty much everyone in Europe had finally started to get their head out of their ass and realize what the fuck they had done wrong vis-a-vis the witchcraft trials. Salem was one of the latter witch trials to ever occur because of this puritanical attitude that the Puritans held. And basically, they were behind the times. That's the main reason why the Salem witch trials occurred, was because when the Puritans parted company with Europe, witch trials were still considered valid, and they had gone off and made their own little commune in places like Massachusetts, and because of the authoritarian nature of their way of thinking, it lent itself to witch trials. But the point I'm trying to get at here is that historically, there's actually a lot more there's actually a lot more confirmed examples of people who practiced folk magic and or witchcraft than the elementary school level understanding that most people have it. According to the elementary school approach to the witch trials, no one who was ever accused did anything remotely like witchcraft, and everyone who was accused irrationally, which is not the case. It is the case mostly in Salem because it was one of the latter witch trials when the hysteria part, the part that required less evidence to hear, was in full swing. But even in Salem, with the examples we have provided by the case of Salem, there's at least some logic to the witch trial or the witchcraft accusation. Namely, Tituba, the first person accused in Salem, was a member of the Arawak tribe, which I believe was in the Caribbean at the time, and she kept a lot of her tribe's folk magic alive after she was traded into service as a slave. And Sarah Good, for the other example, was a midwife. And again, by the logic of the witch trial accusations, midwives were suspect because they were often folk herbalists and folk healers. And if you have the knowledge of herbs to heal, you might also have them to harm. And that's why midwives or various folk healers were usually the ones more likely than not to be accused of witchcraft when the hysteria got going. But it didn't just drop out of the fucking sky. And in particular, in the case of Tituba, this whole horrifying ordeal got the ball rolling because she taught Abigail Williams and Betty Paris to create a phoenix glass, which was essentially you broke an egg into a glass of water and then you tried to use it for divination. Specifically, the Venus glass was meant to show a person what their lover was going to look like, what their future husband or wife was going to look like. And being good Puritan girls, Abigail and Betty wanted to know who they would be wed to someday. So they asked Tituba. Tituba taught them how to make the phoenix glass. Then, shortly thereafter, I think it was like a week after or thereabouts, the girls started to go into convulsive fits, which may actually have been related to epilepsy rather than any bewitching, or it might have been ergot poisoning, one way or the other. And it was this that made the judges of Salem rather nervous, and they investigated, and they found out about the whole Venus glass incident and away Tituba goes in the metaphorical irons, etc. Anyway, moving on.
Yep. Denying one complicity in witchcraft, of course, was expected of witches. Their denials meant nothing in the ensuing trials, but in some ways the courts in Salem were less inclined to impugnious judgments than many of the advocates of today's critical race theory. Cotton Mather consulted after the first wave of Salem executions. Tituba, Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Bridget Bishop warned that there is need of a very critical and exquisite caution, lest by too much credulity for things received only upon the devil's authority, there be a door opened for a long train of miserable consequences, and Satan get an advantage over us. Cotton Mather was, however, still in favor of the speedy and vigorous prosecution of such as have rendered themselves obnoxious.
Okay, minor correction. I might have gotten my victims mixed up there. It may have actually been Bridget Bishop who was the midwife. I just want to throw that out there because I realized as you were reading that I might have gotten Sarah Good and Bridget Bishop confused. That being said, though, having
Right.
caught myself and offered the potential correction if there needs to be one, again, I don't know where you're getting this idea that the witchcraft accusations were entirely erroneous. I think you might be using this as a point to, again, admirably, in my opinion, stick it to critical theory. Which, again, critical theory is one of the most blood-stained, bastardized neo-Hegelian clusterfucks that we, as a species, have ever been accountable for. But you need to get over this idea, this, like, elementary school, just got done watching The Crucible level of thought with regards to the witch trials. There were people who straight up admitted to being witches without any torture or legal force being applied to them because village cunning men or village wise women were definitely a thing. That was a job you could have in the Middle Ages and early modern period. And it is erroneous to act as though the metaphoric or the ethos behind witch hunts actually applied to actual witch hunts. Yes, in the latter part of the hysteria, when people stopped giving a shit about whether someone was actually meaningfully guilty or not, you could get people accused who had no such basis. But usually it was the people who had at least some knowledge of the arts that were broadly grouped under the heading of witchcraft: herbalism, folk magic, folk healing, midwifery, etc., and so on. And midwifery, by the way, was also frequently accused or correlated with accusations of witchcraft, because this was, of course, a time where losing a child in childbirth was not uncommon, and neither was losing both the mother and the child in childbirth was not uncommon. And as a result, if you were looking for someone vile, someone who would profane innocent blood, as was frequently listed in the actual crimes of the accused witches in said trials, you would probably be rather skeptical of the woman who had just delivered a baby who died, or had just delivered a baby whose mother and child died, etc. I.e., seeing as we all know, on some fundamental level, that anyone who hurts a baby is the worst scum of the earth, then in a world where childhood deaths were almost as common as delivering a child healthily, you'd certainly have more people to accuse of vile diabolatry or maleficia, which is what normally gets translated into English as witchcraft in the first place, wouldn't you? Again, I'm not defending the people who did these witchcraft accusations. I'm not defending the people who did actually get erroneously hysterical and start accusing people willy-nilly or because they wanted to. But let's also not strawman history. Let's not strawman the dead. Let's not strawman the historical record. Let's not strawman the court records or court documents of the time. Because given that one of the biggest problems with any given form of critical theory is that it is fundamentally ahistorical and based on a false dichotomy, it is very important that we not base our criticism of critical theory on ahistoricity or false dichotomies. Please. You can't use the weapon of critical theory against itself. And the more you try to erroneously strawman history for the sake of using the ethos behind witch hunt without the historical context behind witch hunt, the more you just make yourself look silly. Because historically, witch trials were more complicated than that. Just like how critical theory almost always gets history wrong, because history itself was always more complicated than that. Moving on.
Yeah. Also, hello, Giant Turtle. Good to see you. Still haven't read anything. Honestly, I gotta pick up on reading like everything I have so far to read just on physical copies. Like even stuff Dalton sent me like years ago. I still need to read. And the comics I've gotten recently. So, yeah, unfortunately, I haven't read any. And sorry about that, Dragon Turtle.
I've been quite busy. I had things to do the last few days, and I haven't even gotten a chance to read half of the stuff that I read specifically for Halloween purposes. I don't know what it is about this year, but this year, for whatever reason, the spooky vibes, Agatha all along notwithstanding, have not really been there for me, and that makes me sad.
No. Yeah, I've been feeling that. I've been feeling it too.
Anyway, let's continue.
Yeah. Although I've never heard of Man with the Hex. Something to look up, I guess. His view lay not far from Ibram X. Kendi views systemic racism. Oh, Ibram X. Kendi views systemic racism, one of the fast-spreading and most fatal cancers humanity has ever known. There's nothing I see in the world today in our history giving me hope that one day anti-racists will win the fight, that one day the flag of anti-racism will fly over the world of equity. Kendi's perspective, consistent with Puritan theology, is that this world has been given over to the corruptions of the infernal powers.
Okay, that's a fair criticism, because Ibram X. Kendi is a fucking moron. And as we both know, anti-racism is worthless because it's based on a bunch of neo-Hegelian or neo-Marxist ideologies. And again, the reason I don't normally use the word neo-Marxist is because in my head, Marx was just a two-bit hack who ripped off other people. And so his ideology should probably most accurately be called either economic Hegelianism, because that was his only innovation, was taking the Hegelian dialectic and zeroing in on an economic aspect of it, or economic neo-Hegelianism, because there was a academic group or academic framework in his time known as the Neo-Hegelians, who were the inheritors of Hegel. If I were in charge of writing textbooks and shit, we wouldn't be giving Marx that much credit because he was an unoriginal hack who basically failed at everything he tried. And giving him more credit than he deserves is frankly erroneous in my opinion. But there is at least some parallels between the way that a critical race theorist views internalized or systemic racism and the way the particularly hysterical Puritans might have viewed witchcraft. The problem is that, ironically, the Puritans had more complex thoughts, feelings, and nuances with regards to witchcraft than do people like Ibram X. Kendi with regards to quote-unquote systemic racism. And again, I'm not saying that the Puritans did anything that should have been done. I consider the entire episode of The Burning Times to be a misanthropic waste of time, and moreover, it probably actually did more harm than it did good. But that's, that's by the by. But one thing you can say for the Puritans and even for the Catholics of this time period, they at least had a complexicated body of views with regards to the issue of witchcraft. For example, this is another thing most people don't know with regards to the witch trials that I feel like we should be educating them on. It wasn't enough to simply use any form of magic to get you accused of witchcraft. It was specifically and nominally maleficia that the courts were interested in, i.e., malefic use of magic. Which, to be fair, if, I don't know, your cow died or you lost a baby or something like that, and then then someone accuses the person you know to know things about folk magic and witchcraft of being, the person who cursed that cow or caused that baby to die, that would probably get you enough to be in court. But one thing is, another thing we don't pay much attention to with regards to the witchcraft accusations, you could actually defend yourself a lot of the time from the accusations of witchcraft, which is something we don't think about much when it comes to the idea of a witch hunt. And I think the reason is because people find the metaphor of a witch hunt to be so rhetorically, to be such a strong piece of rhetoric that we don't actually care whether historical witchcraft trials were more complicated than that or not. And that's, like, metaphorical witch hunts are, of course, very irrational and hysterical, but the historical frameworks behind the Burning Times were a lot more complicated than that, and I don't think we're doing anyone any favors by straw-manning history one way or the other. Moving on.
Yeah. No doubt enough ink has been spilled and pixels deployed by critics of Kendian anti-racism to establish a circularity of his reasoning. Failure to endorse his edicts in Kendi's views is itself racist. His message has been redoubled by Robin DiAngelo and a host of others who seem to believe that they have been handed a profound insight into how our world works.
This is very true, and much like most authoritarian moralistic frameworks that claim to have more understanding of the world working than they do, the actual content of those beliefs are actually very, very simple when all is said and done. doesn't mean it's a witch hunt, doesn't mean that you should use the metaphor of a witch hunt in the way that most people use it, and it doesn't mean that we don't have more to learn about what actually happened in the burning times, because only by actually engaging with the things that actually were said, were thought, were believed, and were acted upon in the burning times can we hope to eventually forestall any future burning times. Now, mind you, most of the only places where modern day witch trials are actually occurring are places like the Muslim world and or certain parts of Africa. And I don't think that we're going to be able to deconvert those people from their hatred of witchcraft. But it would certainly help if we, as the actually educatable people that we are in the West, it would certainly actually help if we stopped giving kids lies because at some point in like elementary school or middle school, the average American kid is going to learn about the Salem witch trials at least, and possibly the other witch trials as well, depending on what the curriculum's like. But we don't do them any favors when we don't teach them what people actually thought, how this actually happened, and why people did what they did. And frankly, this goes back to something that Brainstormer said earlier, ironically, which is that the American educational system is absolutely shit at its job. Because we don't ever actually seem to get to the point where we actually do start telling people about the nuances of things like history or even science. And I would prefer if we, stop doing that. That's especially important for people like us, those of us that oppose critical theory in all its forms, because critical theory is in and of itself a straw man of history and or a sign that the educational system is so broken and ideological that we need to basically reform the entire bastarding thing. But we can't fight critical theory. We can't fight ahistorical narratives if we just start to engage in the very same ahistorical narratives in order to fight them. If you start a fire and I start a fire, sure, eventually those two fires might meet up and burn each other out. But in the interim, a lot of shit's gonna get burned, do you see? So it's very helpful in the event that we're fighting the fire of critical theory or neo-Hegelianism or Frankfurt School ideology, however you want to put it, by actually putting some water on the fire rather than just starting another fire and waiting for the two to burn each other out. Moving on.
Superficially, this is sociological insight, but to the extent that sociology is a real discipline dependent upon careful and critical analysis of empirical evidence, systemic racism is not sociological theory, it is theology, or more precisely, it is demonology, a theory of witchcraft. It has no proof that systemic racism exists in modern American society. All it has is a Salem-esque panic based on the pseudo-authoritative declaration that it exists.
Okay, and again, I agree with you about critical theory. I applaud you for opposing it. But in the process, you have mocked and derided the idea of witchcraft, which, given that there are still practitioners of such things, good luck with that, especially because, I am one. Given also that you threw demonology on the fire there, have fun arguing with all the religious people who are probably more on your side than your enemy's side, because here's the thing. One of the elements of critical theory or neo-Hegelianism is the lionization of material conditions of history, and thereby also the demonization or the undermining of any religious perspective. So whether we like it or not, and I say we because I don't particularly like the fact that so many of the people ostensibly on my side politically are also vehemently against me theologically. As much as we might hate having to deal with people like Gavin McGinnis or Matt Walsh when they go, everything I don't like or don't understand or don't find enjoyment in is demonic or stupid, or every time Matt Walsh makes the anime is demonic argument, or Gavin McGinnis makes the build the table rather than play video games argument, I think I speak for every sane person when I say we would rather not have to deal with those people. But at least for the moment, some percentage of the people who oppose Neo-Hegelianism have religious beliefs of their own, and you can only go so far into shooting your own side in the foot before it becomes a problem. And moreover, as someone who is a, practicing occultist and has been for 18 years, I have done a lot of research and practice with regards to various forms of witchcraft, and I have studied a hell of a lot of demonology. And ironically, by conflating critical theory with demonology, you're wrecking the case for demonology, given that the case for demonology is actually stronger than the case for critical theory. And I wouldn't alienate your friends who might be Catholics or your friends who might be various forms of Protestant by saying critical theory is just as irrational as demonology or witchcraft. Because quite a lot of the people on your side, sir, consider demonology and witchcraft to be, relevant vectors, and consider critical theory to be even weaker than demonology and witchcraft. And by the way, it is. But that's neither here nor there.
We cannot, of course, prove that systemic racism does not exist any more than we can prove that witches don't exist. The West Indian slave Tituba, Tituba, the first Salemite to be accused, at first denied being a witch, but subsequently acknowledged she had learned some occult practices in Barbados. And contemporary America has many self-professed Wiccans. So in some sense, witches do exist, but generally we allow these to be either harmless delusions or acts of self-advertisement.
Okay. This is gonna be a redo of what I just said a little bit here, because, my dude, the reason why we have a problem convincing the critical theorists that their ideology is wrong and that systemic racism doesn't exist is because it is logically impossible to prove a negative. You have just conflated the logical impossibility of proving a negative with the fact that there are actual confirmed examples of the thing you claim there are none of. Do you see how that's not the same thing? And do you see how trying to conflate those two arguments is a complete and utter ideological clusterfuck? The reason you can't disprove witchcraft is because parts of witchcraft work, my dude. You can thank the Renaissance era alchemists for chemistry. You can even thank the astrologers for astronomy, and you can certainly thank quite a lot of modern day herbal medicine. Or you can thank the village witches or cunning men for quite a lot of what is now modern day herbal medicine and so on. Even irrespective of the spiritual element, which again, I fundamentally disagree with you here. The logical and philosophical things that they believed in the Middle Ages, early modern period, and even late antiquity, a lot of that was founded upon magical and metaphysical frameworks and ideologies. If you think that there is no basis for witchcraft or magic or applied spirituality in the practical like metamechanical sense, then you are not well. You are wrong. You are demonstrably wrong, and anyone who's ever opened a grimoire could very easily and elementary explain to you the various ways in which you are wrong. Critical race theory is wrong because they are being circular and self-referential. Critical race theory is wrong because the basic logical axioms of their beliefs are not just wrong, but that are actively contradicted by reality and logic. You don't even need reality to disprove critical theory. Critical theory of any kind, or neo-Hegelianism of any kind, does not hold up to internal logical scrutiny. Magic very much does, in many, many forms. And to act as though humanity at large has nothing of substance to learn from a form of knowledge and spirituality and philosophy and understanding that has existed in every culture on Earth for thousands upon thousands of years is fundamentally in error. And by the way, yes, there are quite a lot of fluffy bunny Wiccans who have no power whatsoever because of their inability to practice things correctly. But that doesn't mean there isn't a correct way to do it. It doesn't mean there aren't more effective ways to do it. And it doesn't mean that there is no reason to look into things like parapsychology, noetics, theosophy. There are so many ways in which magic or magical ideas have informed massive sums of the human capacity for understanding and rationality at all. And the fact that you can conflate something that internally refutes itself at every level, like critical race theory, with magic, frankly, just means that you have not done any research or thought, or, you know what, funnily enough, most people who will thoughtlessly say magic doesn't exist, blah blah, usually those people don't even have a meaningful definition of magic in the fucking first place. So they are asserting a null premise with something that they cannot define. And that is why it fundamentally flummoxes me every time people act as though claiming something to be magical is an automatic "this is irrational, so I win" button. Most of the occult philosophy behind most of Western thought is magical in nature, or ties directly to something that is magical in nature. We wouldn't have most of our current understanding of Plato or Aristotle without people like Henry Cornelius Agrippa, he of De Occulta Philosophia, the 3 books of occult philosophy fame. We wouldn't have modern medicine without Paracelsus. We wouldn't have quite a lot of the Catholic or Christian spirituality at all without quite a lot of the work that was done in medieval and early modern grimoires, and so on and so on and so on. And again, I'd like to point this out for you just one more time. If you are the kind of vehement materialist anti-theist who somehow managed to be on the right side of the critical theory issue, by the way, again, good for you for being against critical theory and neo-Hegelianism. Those things are poison. But quite a lot of the people who are opposed to such things are opposed to such things on the ground of seeing the past, or seeing history, or seeing spirituality as something that is a worthwhile consideration. I happen to be one of them. Now, mind you, there are people in that camp who I don't like, because I don't like the authoritarian, moralistic, family values busybodies of yesteryear any more than I like the modern day academic moral busybodies of social justice / critical theory. So, by all means, oppose the authoritarian moralists of any kind all you can, and I will assist you in doing so. But if you want to lay the claim that there is nothing of substance in spirituality, nothing of substance that we can learn from the occult sciences, just like we can from the natural sciences, I am going to have to press all of the X's for all of the doubt on that point. Moving on.
Systemic racism, by contrast, serves perfectly well as a realistic depiction of some societies, such as the antebellum states in which slavery was permitted. But today's theorists of anti-racism are faced with the difficulty that real systemic racism has disappeared from America. Individual races can be spotted, i.e., people who loathe or at least dislike other people on the basis of race and behave towards those people with prejudice. But systemic racism involving the complicity of law, the approval of society, power of economics, and the reinforcement of culture is just gone. It was officially undone generations ago, and we have since vigorously cleaned out its vestiges.
And again, okay, how can someone so opposed to a bastardizing strawman ideology like neo-Hegelianism and critical theory be also so historically illiterate? Like, my dude, not only is systemic racism well and truly, but, not only are you right in saying that systemic racism is well and truly gone and has been for a jolly long time, the other half of the sentiment, which is very similar to your use of witch hunt as though no one who was ever accused actually held beliefs or practices according to it, this appears to be a consistent blockage for you. Not only was, the burning times bad because people who didn't do what they were being accused of were being accused of, it was just as bad even when the people who were accused actually did some of the things they were accused of, because those things should not have been a mechanism for persecution in the fucking first place, considering that very often it was the most learned members of a given community that ended up getting accused because it was the people who understood herbalism and folk magic and shit. And the reason I bring up that parallel is because you're doing the same thing here with historical systemic racism. Yes, things like Jim Crow definitely had a racial bias and so on, but quite a lot of the history of the period where we did have quote-unquote systemic racism is also more complex than you want to make it. I.e., ask any Southerner about the Civil War, and you will learn, at least quite a lot of the time, that there was more to the Civil War than just was slavery allowed or not allowed. Quite a lot of the Civil War was due to the fact that Abraham Lincoln was a goddamn tyrant, and he wanted to strengthen the central government so much and basically elect himself as dictator. And there were also other rights that the southern states felt themselves abused with regards to that had absolutely nothing to do with slavery, and there were also quite a lot of abolitionists on the side of the Confederacy during the Civil War. This pathological need you have to poo-poo the critical theory, which again is definitely something you should oppose, but also commit the exact same historical strawmanning that they commit, it flummoxes me. If you want to oppose people who are moralistically authoritarian and do not have the truth with regards to history or reality, it would be very helpful for you to have more understanding of that historical reality than they do. Because all you're doing here is basically playing the Uno reverse card on the critical theorists. You're accusing them of something that you yourself are guilty of, and that's why I'm mad at you. I've gone actually on a rather interesting journey with this article, because when it started, I couldn't tell whether they were in favor of or against critical theory, and then when they revealed that they were against it, I was happy and started to praise them. But then they started committing the exact same crimes as the critical theorists while trying to oppose it, and that doesn't help. This has once again become one of those things where it's like, this is why we can't have nice things. If you want to oppose critical theory, you have to actually stop doing the things they do wrong. Because all you're doing here is making our side look like the stupid one for committing exactly the same infractions that we are criticizing the other side for doing. If you want critical theory to actually be gone, you have to attack it at its root, not just incidentally because it does stuff you don't like. Moving on.
That leaves the proponents of systemic racism chasing after spectral evidence. They may not be able to see systemic racism with ordinary human eyes, but they know it is there, and they have special magic eyes to see through its myriad disguises to the ugly truth beneath. William Studden and Cotton Mather would be proud of them.
I mean, no, because William Stanton and Cotton Mather didn't understand. Okay, I'm not gonna commit the crime I just bitched at this guy for doing. I highly doubt that they would see systemic racism as the same thing as witchcraft. And even if they did, this goes back to my point of history was more complicated than we have been led to believe in our 101 level understanding in elementary school. You do know that even during the Puritan times, abolitionists were a thing. So you might wind up with them joining in with the critical race theorists on that point. But also, even the quotes that you've quoted from Cotton Mather here tell you that he was a skeptic of the witch trials to a large degree. And if you read more of his or his father's work, you would know that that's a consistent pattern. He was actually one of the voices preaching moderation during the witch trials, which is why I don't fucking hate Cotton Mather. Because he was at least willing to go, hold up, let's make sure we actually get those people who are actually guilty before we sentence them to anything. Which is, given the time period he was in and the context he was living in and the intellectual oeuvre he operated in, that is a laudable sentiment. And ironically, I think by conflating modern day critical theorists or neo-Hegelians with Cotton Mather, you're actually giving the critical race you're actually giving the critical theorists and the neo-Hegelians more credit than they deserve, because Cotton and Increase Mather's opinions were more academically consistent and informed, as well as more complex, than the opinions of your average critical theorists. Again, I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to slam the critical theorists as just as irrational as most people assume the witch hunts were. But in order to dethrone the critical theorists for being a bunch of ahistorical, ideologically driven hacks, you have allowed yourself to perpetuate a misunderstanding of the actual history of the burning times. And it would be very helpful if we could stop fucking lying to children about this and actually give them some of the history that we know actually happened, rather than just allowing this meme of witch trials were 100% irrational all the time to persist, because it's not true, it never was true, and it probably never will be true, because even in the modern world, the Muslims and Africans who still perpetuate witch trials do have more complex reasons for doing what they're doing. Doesn't make it right, but it does mean that in order to rebut these things accurately, you can't strawman your opponent. Moving on.
All right. The rise and widespread acceptance within elite institutions of the theory of systemic racism may surprise many Americans who pride themselves on their secular rationality. They are past the age of credulous enthusiasms, or so we like to think. This is a time when we give highest authority to views that we elevate to the status of science. It is an amusing conceit, especially considering the ease with which ideologies that have very weak scientific foundations, or none at all, manage to appropriate the name of science for whatever collection of suppositions and spurious inferences they wish to sell.
That is a fair point. Well done. I find nothing whatsoever to be objectionable about that. And yes, I agree. It is dangerous to assume that just because an ideology is secular, that therefore it's more legitimate than like metaphysical or theological conceits. The problem with the moralistic authoritarianism of yesteryear was not that it was supernatural, it was that it was moralistic and authoritarian. And that very same level of moralistic authoritarianism can be found in quite a lot of modern, ostensibly secular ideologies, most of which go back to either Hegel or Rousseau or some combination of the two. And I agree with you that we should make this point as often as we can, so that hopefully the moralistic authoritarianism will be bled out of these ideologies, and therefore so will most of their ideological potency. I.e., if we can convince people that the moralistic authoritarianism is what's wrong with these ideologies, then we can convince people that just because an ideology is secular doesn't magically make it immune to being moralistic and authoritarian. Moving on.
Climate change is perhaps one part science to 10 parts hysteria. The COVID-19 pandemic was real, but was bundled and rebundled in lies, rumors, hocus pocus, medical myth making, and statistical illiteracy.
Again, yes, this is also very true. Although I question the inclusion of hocus pocus in there because there was nothing magical about the COVID 20 or 19 hysteria. Point being, again, you've smuggled in there the conflation of anything magical or supernatural with irrational, and those aren't the same thing. And once again, we would be better off explaining to people that these ideologies, the occult sciences, are not irrational, rather than using the specter of what people think these things are to moralistically poo-poo anything we don't like. Magic is not irrational, and we need to get it. It's not empirical either necessarily, i.e., it's not founded on naturalism, physicalism, or empiricism, but it is rational. It is in fact far more rational than the people who believe in things like critical race theory and neo-Hegelianism. And yes, I know that quite a lot of people in the modern age who adhere to neo-Hegelianism or critical theory do, like, as a political statement, engage with things like Wicca. But that doesn't mean that magic doesn't work, and it doesn't mean there's nothing intellectually substantive about magic. It means that people who are wrong about lots of things are also wrong about their approach to magic. Which honestly shouldn't be all that surprising, considering that neo-Hegelianism creates moralistic authoritarianism and irrationality pretty much everywhere it goes. Moving on.
All right. There are probably very few widely attested beliefs among Americans that are not, in some significant ways, grounded in shared illusions. Few of those illusions, however, are as destructive as systemic racism, which invites America down a path of social division that makes old-fashioned witch trials look like the wholesome models of judicial restraint.
Again, you are 100% correct in this part, but that the end part there, the end part has been true this entire time, and if you had gotten it through your head, you wouldn't be making so many rookie mistakes. Again, I agree with you and I support you in opposing neo-Hegelianism and critical theory in all its vectors. Especially because, if anything, in that last paragraph, or that last sentence, you kind of underestimated how widespread the problem is. If you get rid of systemic racism, but you keep the neo-Hegelian framework intact, some new variant of the disease is just going to evolve again, and we're going to be right back to square one. Because frankly, the problem is not anything in between the words critical and theory. The problem is critical theory, full stop. The problem is neo-Hegelianism, full stop. The problem is Marxism, full stop, etc., ad nauseum. We need to reevaluate Hegel's historical dialectic in its entirety, because it is almost entirely without any merit whatsoever. And we need to evaluate Rousseauian liberalism specifically, because Lockean liberalism and Hobbesian liberalism are much more intellectually and rationally valid than anything Rousseau ever did. If we can get rid of the framework of Hegel and Rousseau and any combinations thereof, we will actually be a certain vector of the way through fixing the problem. And yes, Dragon Turtle, I did see your comment about how if Hegel and Rousseau hadn't done it, someone else might have. But here's the thing. While that is true, it's still worthwhile to make the attempt to undo as much of the intellectual work that Hegel and Rousseau did as we can. And two, those two people, for all their faults, were very original thinkers, as demonstrated by the fact that not only were they rather unique in and of themselves, but they informed other people who were less original than they were. So there is at least some argument that we might be able to get rid of the problems of Rousseauian liberalism and Hegelianism or neo-Hegelianism if we got rid of those two. Because if basically most of Hegel and Rousseau's philosophy didn't exist without them, and so it's at least possible we might be able to get away from it if we got rid of them. It is also possible that you're right and that some other person would come up with a similar idea, especially given the fact that I believe in the process of independent spontaneous invention, or the idea of a idea whose time has come. And it's very possible that we might not be able to get rid of the evils of Rousseau and Hegel, but at least as far as we know, they were the patient zeros of their respective stupidity, and we might as well make an attempt to undo everything they did, given that everything they did has, in various ways, backfired horribly and resulted in death and suffering for the last 200 or 300 years, full stop. Anyway, moving on.
Alright, I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I went to get a drink.
Just as I was ending the rant.
Alright. I put Americans at the center of that last paragraph, but as an anthropologist who has read broadly in world in anthropography,
Anthography, I think.
I will gladly forfeit any idea of American exceptionalism when it comes to readiness to credit the existence of witch-like malevolent powers. The power of invisible forces to torment mankind is a cultural universal.
Okay, I am now feeling much less bad about undoing all of the stupid bullshit you have done throughout this article, because I was actually feeling bad for you for a second, because we are at least ostensibly on the same side, and I wondered if I was being overly pedantic. But if you're an anthropologist, you have absolutely no reason to be this uneducated with regards to the actual historical witch trials. If you're an anthropologist and can in any way meaningfully speak on anthropology as a discipline or with any authority, you should damn well know that witch trials are more complex than the metaphor of the witch hunt would imply. And if you know that and are just trying to make a partisan political point for the sake of defeating critical theory, then you have failed in your duty as an educator. Because if anyone should speak with more nuance and three-dimensionality on the Burning Times, it is someone who is a historian or an anthropologist. Because you know as well as I do, or at least you should know as well as I do, how many oversimplified strawmans exist in the ethos of witch trials and the Burning Times. And if you know and chose not to educate people on the grounds of making a partisan political point, then you are a hack, and I have lost all respect for you. And if you don't know about the various nuances that I pointed out in the course of this article, then you are a bad anthropologist. You are not good at your job. So these are your options. Either you are good at your job and you chose not to educate anyone on the nuances of the Burning Times so that you could make a partisan political point, then you are a hack and have failed in your duty as an educator. And if you don't know about the things that I have referenced here with regards to the Burning Times, then you are a anthropologist who is utterly shit at his job. Those are your only options. Either you're a partisan political hack who isn't doing his job correctly for the reason of he wants to stick it to enemies, which, again, I want to keep iterating here, or reiterating here. I hate neo-Hegelianism and critical theory with a passion that burns with the white-hot intensity of 1,000 suns. But you cannot oppose them by performing the exact same failings that they are also doing. Because the reason that we oppose them should be that they are logically incoherent, criminally liable for every form of totalitarianism and torture in the last 300 years, and that they were demonstrably wrong and demonstrably logically inconsistent with themselves from minute one. Those are the reasons to oppose critical theory or neo-Hegelianism in any form. But you can't beat them by performing their same faults. You can't beat them by also oversimplifying and strawmanning the shit out of history. Because that's bullshit. That's just changing where the destructive bullshit comes from. If you're an anthropologist, you need to actually do your job and do it correctly, which in this case would involve explaining the various nuances of the Burning Times. And if you don't, or you don't know, then the only other two options, as I said, are you're shit at your job and should therefore not be taken as an authority in regards to it, or you are a deliberately obfuscating partisan who is choosing not to do his job correctly, even though he is capable of doing it. And in either case, fuck you, sir. Either you are shit at your job, or you know what your job is, and you're choosing not to do it. So fuck off.
Moving on.
Yep, moving on.
All right. The exact forms of witchcraft accusations, protections against the hidden powers of undisclosed enemies, methods of discovery, punishments, and reprisals vary among sub-Saharan African societies, Inuits, Amazons, Sri Lankans, and so on, but not the suspicion that sinister powers are at work. Atheistic societies are far from immune. Stalin and Mao had their equivalent imaginary categories of unseen wreckers and cultural traitors.
Again, how in the honest fuck is an anthropologist this illiterate about the Burning Times or the phenomena of witch trial accusations? You just hand-waved away the actual meaningful historical nuances and cultural nuances between various different forms of witch trial accusation. And yet you claim to be an anthropologist. How in the actual fuck do you still have a job? Like, you must have tenure up the wazoo, or I would have expected you to get fired by now. And I'm okay. I will extend an olive branch and stop being an angry pissant for a second here. It is possible that you are an anthropologist who just focuses on a different historical area than the witch trials and the Burning Times. But if you are an anthropologist who focuses on something completely different from the Burning Times, you really shouldn't use something you are not familiar with as a metaphor for the problems with critical theory and neo-Hegelianism, because all you've done in this article is make a complete tit of yourself by hand-waving away all of the centuries and different cultures of historical and cultural nuance vis-a-vis witchcraft and witchcraft accusations. And oh wait, I just remembered something. Earlier in this article, he said that we, as a society, view Wiccans or other magical practitioners and occultists as either deluded or attention-seeking. That is not a perspective that you should have if you are an anthropologist. Like, DT, you went to school for anthropology, I do believe, if I'm remembering correctly. Do they ever allow for this kind of cultural or historical strawmanning of entire belief systems in anthropology? Because I was always under the impression, from what I've seen of anthropology, that most anthropologists try their college best not to ever trivialize other people's or other cultures or historical regions' beliefs, full stop. Especially not when it's something that's a human universal, like the belief in like magic, mysticism, and occultism shit. So either this guy, frankly, I find it baffling that a guy like this would even have an anthropology degree to begin with. I am so like, I'm half tempted to do some research on this guy and figure out whether his degree is honorary or something. Because this level of just historically and culturally illiterate nonsense is something that I wouldn't even expect from, like, political commentators like the Lotus Eaters and shit. Like, my fucking god, this guy is either talking out of his ass on something he has no familiarity with whatsoever, or he is choosing to be an absolute ahistorical and anti-intellectual cunt. And again, I agree with him and his opposition to, like, critical theory and neo-Hegelianism. But the reasons I oppose critical theory and neo-Hegelianism are its historical illiteracy, its moralistic authoritarianism, and its tendency to ideologically weaponize and strawman every form of intellectualism we have, or academic rigor that we have. And this guy appears to be at least as guilty of most of those crimes as your average, like, wokeoid would. And I am very flummoxed. Like, is this the type? I don't want to accuse him of political partisanship just on the face of it, but this guy seems like the kind of guy whose degree would only come from a place like PragerU. Because most other understandings of anthropology that I'm aware of would never be so crass and historically and culturally illiterate to just hand wave away people's beliefs as delusional or attention-seeking. Certainly not someone who ostensibly opposes, like, critical theory and neo-Hegelianism.
Moving on.
Yeah, sorry. I just now looked at the chat. I'm trying to see what sorry. My eyes are refusing to want to focus for a second. Can you read what he said, Brainstormer? The last two things he said?
Yeah,
'Cause
I mean,
I think
can I?
it's an attempt to answer me, and my eyes just don't want to focus
I get it.
for a second, I guess.
Yeah, even if you view it as a false or immoral, you're supposed to remain more impartial than that. It's like being an accountant for someone and judging them for their purchases or something.
Yeah, okay, thank you for confirming that for me, because that was always the impression that I got with regards to like, granted, some of the people who are anthropologists exhibit like a ideological false neutrality, because ironically anthropology does sometimes get meddled with regards to social justice and neo-Hegelianism, but most of the good and well-respected anthropologists that I was aware of try to endeavor to understand things in context and don't like strawman the shit out of their area of study. I genuinely am curious now whether this guy actually has an anthropology degree or if he's just completely lying. Moving on.
All right. Thus, folks like Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo are tapping into something very old and very human. Our seemingly limitless capacity to project our fears onto monsters in the dark. Monsters that wear the faces of our family members, friends, and neighbors, and worst of all, our own faces in the mirror. Perhaps the last element owes something to the legacy of Sigmund Freud, who warned us to beware of the beast that lurks within. But even the idea has plenty of folk precedents in the ideas about possession by demons and involuntary transformation of men into werewolves and the like. Kendi has given us the up-to-date theory of American werewolvery, with white people, one and all, cast as Canis lupus.
I agree with your opposition to neo-Hegelianism and critical theory, but you just not only strawmanned like everything that we know of with regards to the Burning Times and or modern day witchcraft accusations and so on. You basically just strawmanned any like theologian or religious person who believes in possession, or like, yes, there is something rotten in the state of Denmark with regards to neo-Hegelianism and critical theory. I would locate that in their tendency toward ideological groupthink and moralistic authoritarianism. I don't think it has anything to do with the supernatural or like metaphysical or non-physical. And again, for someone who claims to be an anthropologist, you are far too comfortable and far too cavalier with just hand waving away the reasons why different cultures or different historical periods believed in certain supernatural creatures. Which is completely separate from the fact that I am a practicing occultist, and thus I believe in things like spirits and things. And there is nothing irrational, at least not internally irrational, about believing in the existence of spirits and things. I think most of the reason why, like the fear of monsters and spirits and things is a human universal is because it was an evolutionary benefit to, but I'm not just saying that in the like cynical, oh, this was evolutionarily convenient and so it stuck around. I mean that also in the sense that it is exactly what we would expect to happen if spirits and monsters of various different kinds do actually exist. I.e., one of the reasons why belief in monsters and spirits and things might have stuck around in our evolution is not just because of things like projection or self-preservation, but also because in the event that such entities are real, you would expect belief in them to be evolutionarily worthwhile, would you not? I.e., if there actually are goblins and trolls and witches and things hiding in the shadows sometimes, a consistent belief in something similar to that would be beneficial because in the event that it's true, the truth of it would make it evolutionarily relevant, would it not? And again, I'm gonna reference the neutrality that I've seen evidenced in most anthropologists that I've ever dealt with, and that DT confirmed for me. If this is your attempt to be quote unquote neutral on folk beliefs and folk spirituality and the beliefs in various different like cryptids and supernatural creatures and so on, you are completely fucking up how anthropology is supposed to work, my dude. I'm now about 55% sure, i.e., I lean in the direction of it's probably an honorary degree. Yeah, but I'm like 55% sure that your degree is probably honorary because no anthropologist worth their salt, be they woke or unwoke, would be this flippant and strawmannish and disregard culture, society, and history in this way. Moving on.
Right. All right. To say that the seat of the systemic racism is a recrudescence of an ancient and broadly human kind of myth-making is not to excuse it. We should know our vulnerabilities and temptations, and we should draw on our civilized capacity to resist very bad but alluring ideas. Systemic racism allures because it grants an all-purpose excuse for the failures, disappointments, and unhappiness of American blacks. And it allures whites who long for the rewards of contriteness and penitence, which are no less real. Nor should we forget the opportunists of all races who see the chances of financial gain, social status, and political influence that come from indulging the new cult.
Yeah, DT, that's fair enough. What I meant was, as long as the culture in question is third world or brown, they tend to give more weight to their that culture's folk beliefs because Monoville Savage mythology. Yes, there's the other side of it in which they believe that all beliefs are like historically material, etc., and therefore it's not because anything about these beliefs are relevant or true, it's because something 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 cynical cultural strawman. But yeah, what I meant was whether you're woke or anti-woke as an anthropologist, you usually try for some vector of neutrality. That doesn't always work in the event of the woke ideologue because they believe that the only reason anyone has beliefs is because something 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 historical materialism, and or they only extend that level of benefit of the doubt to the foreign, the third world, and the brown, and never ever extend it to the West whatsoever. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. What I mean is that like they give places like Africa or the Middle East way more leniency when it comes to being, culturally neutral or culturally accepting than they ever will give to their own countrymen. But they at least have a vector of rationale that says attempt neutrality. They don't live up to that because they have ideological presuppositions of like neo-Hegelian historical materialism, blah blah. But at least on some kind of paper, a wokeoid would agree to not strawmanning the shit out of cultures that they like or cultures that they feel obliged to bolster because my white savior and my noble savage. Which, their bullshit is that they don't ever abide by their own rules. Ever. But even they would at least some of the time remember that being charitable and or neutral to other cultures is a thing that anthropologists are supposed to do. They're not consistent with it, and they have all sorts of ideological exceptions because derp reasons, but they would at least understand if they were reacting to this article that was probably one of the ways in which this person failed. But anyway, point being, I think we're all in agreement that this person is a complete and utter hack, and probably only maintains the degree he maintains because of tenure. Because if he doesn't have tenure and he's not been fired, what the fuck is going on?
Dom.
Like even if we agree with him that critical theory and neo-Hegelianism are heinous, wrong, stupid shit, he has demonstrated a complete failure to be a proper anthropologist. So he should be fired unless he has tenure. That's the only reason I will accept for him not to be fired. Moving on.
Alright, witchcraft crazes never end well, nor for the accused, solemn for the accusers, and certainly not for the society that has permitted this temporary descent into madness. Where today is our William Phipps, the governor who had the sense to put a stop to the orgy of hangings in a 17th century New England Where today is our William Phipps, the governor who had the sense to put a stop to the orgy of hangings in the 17th century New England village when the leading intellectual authorities would not. He has not stepped forward yet, but we can be confident he will.
Again, I think by calling neo-Hegelianism and critical theory the modern day equivalent of a witch hunt, you're actually giving neo-Hegelianism and critical theory more credit than they deserve. Because for as heinous and moralistic and stupid as the Burning Times were, they at least had more reason and more consistent rationales for doing the things they do than the folks at the Frankfurt School do or ever did. So if anything, you're giving the critical theory and neo-Hegelianism more credit than they deserve and not giving witch trials enough. Which I never thought I would see the day where I was going to be arguing that we should be more intellectually honest about the people who burnt and hanged and crushed, thousands and possibly millions, but I don't like ahistorical revisionist history or ideological lens pulling. So, if you do those things, even if you do those things in the name of something I broadly agree with, I will be here to be consistent with my beliefs and call you out for being an ahistorical brat. Or, yeah, a twat. So, speaking as someone whose background is also in the humanities, specifically philosophy, you can go fuck yourself, sir. You are terrible at being an anthropologist. And the fact that this level of ahistorical bullshit was committed by someone who is ostensibly an anthropologist makes me realize that that for as bad as neo-Hegelianism and critical theory are, they are not responsible for all of the failings of the modern day humanities. They are still responsible for the lion's share of them, though. So I will encourage you in the sense that you should continue to believe that critical theory and neo-Hegelianism are terrible, but you need to get better at opposing them by actually being more right than they are, instead of just for partisan political reasons. Moving on.
On the shape of things before us now, I don't expect we will come from the church or the university, but both have absorbed the poison of imaginary guilt too deeply to provide the needed leadership. The business community is even more tainted from where then should we look for our fips. I don't know, but I expect he will be someone who can call us back to our abiding ideals without spending too much time reminding us how foolish we have been in indulging these collective recriminations.
Ironically, it's likely to come from places like YouTube or Odyssey or Rumble and places like that. Because the one good thing about the modern day world is that, by and large, people have realized that the establishment of any given institution is bullshit, and that a lot of truths that the establishment just doesn't want to deal with or doesn't like can be found elsewhere. So my hopes lie with the Gen Alphas, with some of the Zoomers, with some of the Millennials, and with some of the Gen Xers, in the sense that those of us who maintain a principle of being irreverent in the face of establishment authorities and institutions, and those of us who maintain populist and or libertarian leanings with regards to such things, are probably the people who are going to find a way to save things. There's also people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk in enough power that they can be a meaningful contradiction to the establishment institutionalism. So there is actually hope. It has taken us 10 years to dig this wide of a hole in their lattice structure, but the hole has been successfully dug, and it is slowly making their edifice crumble. And so much the better. Hopefully it doesn't get replaced with more family values, moralistic traditionalism, because that would just land us in exactly the same place as we were in the 90s, and we'd have to do this all over again. But hopefully it takes the form of a full stop rejection of moralistic authoritarianism and or normative institutionalism, so we can replace it with meritocracy rather than with just another flavor of moralistic authoritarianism. Hopefully. Moving on.
Yes, sorry, I muted myself real quick. I don't think we're gonna finish the video. Obviously, maybe next we'll get at least halfway done and then finish it next week.
Yeah.
So, Don, you want to explain the video for?
This is a video on the topic of Agatha All Along, by, I forget the guy's name actually. Greg Owen. Usually he is pretty based. He is, however, not in this case, because like a lot of people have done with regards to Agatha All Along, they've tried to conflate Agatha all along with stuff like The Acolyte, like Velma, like Rings of Power, and so on. And they've done so largely erroneously. I am quite a big fan of Agatha all along. Episode 6 notwithstanding, Episode 6 was fucking awful and did a lot to undermine my goodwill for the show. But as I opened the stream with talking about, while episodes 1 and 4 are slightly weaker than the rest, and episode 6 is utterly unwatchable dog shit, that actually doesn't even have much relevance to the overall show. The episodes have largely been on the good side of neutral in the case of episodes 1 and 4, and actually pretty awesome in the case of episodes 2, 3, and 5. I think probably the best episode is episode 5, although episode 5 is also the shortest episode. But long story short, point being, people like Gary from Nerdrotic, people like Mahler, people like Prickle Drinker, and so on, have tried to view Agatha all along as if it's identical to unwatchably horrible shit like Daniel Kibble-Smith's New Warriors, Velma, Rings of Power, Acolyte, and so on. And there's basically no basis for them to. And this guy tries to explain his reasons for classing it as that. And so we will get into his argument as to why and why I think it doesn't hold much water. Jack-o'-lanterns.
Jack-o'-lanterns.
The show is TV-14, so is the video. It's going to get weird. I'm just saying. Like probably most of you, I forgot the Agatha show was happening. A few days ago, I saw some headlines and suddenly I remember, like, oh yeah, they are making a follow-up story to a side character / villain from WandaVision. They really are out of ideas and have completely lost the plot on who they're trying to make.
No. They decided to give Agatha her own show because she was the breakout character for WandaVision. And moreover, they specifically scheduled that show to come out during Halloween season, which is a good time to release a show about the like supernatural or spooky or like horror side of Marvel. And given that she was the breakout character from WandaVision, and frankly the only reason to watch the show in retrospect, it makes perfect sense to A, give her her own show, and B, release said show around Halloween season. Jack-o'-lanterns.
Alright. Alright.
Shows for, haven't they? So the 2-episode premiere happened this week, and for perhaps the 1000th time in the last year or so, I wondered, who's this supposed to be for? What is the MCU doing? Since the show is crass, I will be as well. This show seems like a solid, mirror-polished tungsten, or perhaps
Okay. Since that's going to be a crucial part of your argument, I will go on to explain who the show is for. People who liked WandaVision well enough to justify a spinoff, people who liked Agatha as the breakout character for said spinoff, and, of course, people who were looking for something Halloween-based to watch during quote-unquote spooky season. This makes total sense. It especially makes total sense when you consider that one of the best things actually arguably the best thing in Phase 4 full stop, was the Halloween special they did last year, or actually no, not last year, the year before last, with Werewolf by Night. And I don't know why you seem to be unaware of that audience. The people who were at least on board enough with WandaVision that they wouldn't mind a sequel, especially not given that there are quite a lot of people who liked most of WandaVision and hated the way it ended because it framed Wanda as though she did nothing wrong, and set up things in Multiverse of Madness that a lot of people didn't like. So not only is making a sequel show to WandaVision that covers the breakout character from that show make perfect sense, especially given that she's a witch and you can frame it as a Halloween exercise. It also helps them do the thing where they could actually retcon WandaVision and Multiverse Madness and get rid of a lot of the things people didn't like about it, which they kind of appear to be doing. Also, with regards to your "who is this show for" question, are you actually saying that that people can't root for or empathize with characters who aren't 100% like them? Because that's a strangely woke argument of yours. If you're actually arguing that Agatha all along must be a bad show just because it stars a female character or a niche villain or whatever the fuck. I'm not saying you're saying it, but your question of who is the show for doesn't take into account when the show is coming out, what the show is in context of, or the fact that she was the breakout character for WandaVision. Anyway, Jack-o'-lanterns.
Right.
Swarovski crystal butt plug. Structurally, it's quite sound. And for those who are interested in this sort of product, I get the feeling that it is delivering exactly what that audience would want. Question is, how big is that audience, really? And furthermore, why is this in the Lego aisle? I mean, technically it is a toy.
Okay, can I say something?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be rude to the guy or anything, but he's coming off as such a jackass.
Yeah, no, getting into that. I understand why you used the butt plug metaphor. You did it to make the show seem silly or absurd. But I have a very important substantive question here. Why are you using that metaphor? Why do you think that Agatha is this thing that comes out of nowhere? Especially given, and this was actually why I wanted to respond to this video. He gets through basically this entire video without ever realizing that one of the factors that Agatha has going for itself is that it came out during Halloween season. He never once acknowledges that releasing a show like Agatha during Halloween season makes perfect fucking sense and does at least allow that more people than otherwise would normally watch it would likely watch it. And the other thing is, and he kind of gives his hand away here in this metaphor as well. He himself just admitted, you heard him say, that the show is structurally sound and that it's made of a bunch of good material and stuff. The only criticism he has is that he thinks those resources were used to make a butt plug. But like I said, why do you think it's a butt plug? What about it makes you think it is a butt plug? That makes no sense to me, and I've seen this video pretty much the whole way through, and nothing he says in the interim ever gives context as to why it's a butt plug, metaphorically. Anyway, Jack-o'-lanterns.
Toy, but this show is odd because it has some bright spots that I do want to point out. And when you look at the framework of the kind of story that it's telling, it is doing it correctly. but I don't think anybody's going to watch this. And also, I think people that do aren't going to enjoy it. I know that sounds...
Okay, so again, and this is the thing I just mentioned. He even admits that it's structurally sound and that it has bright spots and that there are many good things about it or that are going in its favor. But he also assumes that no one is going to watch it or have any reason to, which I don't know what substantively actually makes him think that. And I also don't know why he thinks that the people who would like a show like this aren't going to end up liking it. Now, mind you, I was much more positive on Agatha before last Wednesday, because episode 6 genuinely is the first awful episode of that show. But the 5 episodes preceding that show were on the neutral, or they were on the good side of neutral in the case of the weaker episodes, episode 1 and episode 4, and were genuinely pretty solid for episodes 2, 3, and 5. So I don't he obviously hadn't seen episode 6 before making this video. So what about the 2-part pilot of the show made him think that there's no one who wants this, or that even the people who do want this are going to be disappointed? Because prior to last week's episode, I was fucking vibing on Agatha all along, but that's neither here nor there. Jack-o'-lanterns.
Sounds vague and confusing, like how can it be doing something correctly and still not be good? Let me explain. Using our initial object as an example, it shares qualities with other products that you might want. It's going in you like an earring, so you want non-porous surfaces and high quality materials. This is the kind of product that needs to be sturdy. You don't want chip.
Okay, and again, the entirety of your argument, sir, and again, I've watched basically this entire video prior to making this response video to it, or making this segment of our podcast a response to this. I have no idea why you assume that it is metaphorically like a butt plug. And again, I have watched this entire video, and I still have no idea why you insist that it must be a butt plug. Because all you have, other than the insinuation that this is a metaphorical butt plug, is the statement that even though it's made with good materials and is structurally sound and makes sense, you still don't think it's good or will work. And if you remove the butt plug metaphor from this video, you realize that you have no argument. Not one. Niet. Nil point. Because you're about to go through a list of things that this show has going for it, and you're going to neglect to mention that this show is coming out for Halloween, which is a large part of the reason why I think it's more successful than you thought it was going to be, because Marvel was at least smart enough to release the Witch show that relied on spooky or horror vibes during the Halloween season, which is the correct time and place to watch this or to launch this, because people who are normally not into witchy bullshit will be more willing to give a show like Agatha a chance during Halloween. And anyone who will like witchy bullshit is more likely to like it. And also, calling back to the thing about the audience, you do realize that Marvel Comics has an entire section of its universe that's mystical or supernatural or based on horror or spooky characters. things like Werewolf by Night, things like Moon Knight, things like Doctor Strange, things like Tomb of Dracula, and so on. Those comics were still mostly enjoyed by men, just like all other superhero comics tend to be. So you appear to also be operating on the assumption that no man ever likes the like supernatural or mystical corner of the Marvel Universe, despite the fact that it has existed for a long, long time, and characters like Doctor Strange have had multiple runs within comics and is a fan favorite character, and so on. Same thing with Werewolf by Night. Same thing like with Damian Halfgrim. Same thing with Ghost Rider, etc., ad nauseum. And the only reason you have, apparently, to think that it won't go well is because you think it's going for a female audience, which I don't think it really is. It stars some female characters, but there's nothing like particularly feminist about the show or anything, or certainly not ideologically feminine or anything like that. But anyway, Jack-o'-lanterns.
1 sec.
Breaking, marring of the surface, like anything else that you're going to purchase, you want quality. And tungsten, fine crystal, these are good materials. Likewise, this show is about a character who has lost everything and needs to get a ragtag group together to accomplish a goal. But the group doesn't trust each other, but they all have certain skills that will...
Yeah. The actual structure of the show, to your own admittance, makes sense. Your only criticism appears to be it's about a female character who's a witch and no one wants that. But one, Mystic Marvel or Supernatural Marvel is a definite corner of the Marvel Universe with a lot of fans to it. And two, the character's already pre-established because she was the breakout character in WandaVision. And three, the show is releasing during Halloween season, and that is the perfect time to get even the normies to the normies into spooky shit a little bit. And the writing quality is good. The plot, as you just outlined, is structurally sound. They were smart enough to release it during Halloween, and she was the breakout character and the breakout actor from a previously established show, which is one of Disney Plus's most successful shows, because when WandaVision originally came out, it didn't have the poison reputation that it currently has, and people were more willing to give WandaVision a chance. Granted, that bit everyone in the ass come episode 9, because episode 9 was shit, but at least at the time of WandaVision, which includes stuff that involved Agatha, more people were more willing to give it a chance because Phase 4 and 5 hadn't developed the poison reputation that it currently has yet, and a lot of those people who were willing to give WandaVision a chance ended up liking Agatha and recalling her as one of the best parts of the show. So they were willing to come back when a show, which again released during Halloween season, focused on her and the mystical corner of Marvel. Jack-o'-lanterns.
Doesn't trust each other, but they all have certain skills that will be needed. The risks are high and the baddies are chasing them, but if they can pull off this one job, everybody will get what they want. But perhaps one of the group will betray them. Mystery and high stakes abound. Was I talking about Ocean's 11 just now? Magnificent 7? Dirty Dozen? Big...
Okay. It's a common trope. So
Right, and
why is it a...
That's what he's saying. He's giving the show a compliment in that he thinks the setup of the show is good. He still, for some reason, thinks that the show is a metaphorical butt plug, though, and I can't for the life of me understand why, even though I've watched this entire video once already. This is the thing. You just gave the show a compliment. and the compliment was sound, because that is a solid basis for a show, or a movie, or a story, or whatever. Where I disagree with you is that you think the show has some as yet unknown negative qualities that somehow bring it down, and you make it through almost this entire video without ever mentioning what those negative qualities that you assume it has are. Anyway, moving on. Jack-o'-lanterns.
Hero 6, when I'm talking about the framework for the kind of story that we're telling, that's what I'm talking about. The generic formula for this kind of tale. Band of Misfits accomplishes an impossible goal. But it is possible for you to achieve the goal of hitting the like button.
Yep.
Okay, fuck off. 2. It doesn't matter how how when you use the trope, it's how you use the trope.
Yeah, and I think that's what he's going to try to say about Agatha all along, that he likes the trope, but he doesn't think they use it well. Which, granted, remember that at this point he's only seen the 2-part pilot. He's only seen the 2 episodes that released the first week of the show, which I think was late September. But one, you don't actually expand on why you think this show is an example of it being used wrong, and again, I've watched this entire video, and 2, throughout this entire video, you refuse to acknowledge one of the best things that Disney did when they decided to release the show during Halloween season, which is, during Halloween season, when people are looking for something spooky to watch, is the perfect time to release a show like this with an established character people already like, and an actor who was a breakout hit in the previous show, and is witchy, and again, Marvel already has a mystic or supernatural corner that they can expand on using Agatha all along as a support structure for. And that Agatha all along can also in turn draw on to get people to watch it. Jack-o'-lanterns.
It was later in the video. You thought I forgot, didn't you? I'm not even going to walk away. I'm
Yep.
unpredictable. You know what it is? Predictably delicious. Berries tea.
Skip.
Uh,
The ad is an utter waste of time. I apologize. I know you have to do your shilling on YouTube as well as we do, but like
we don't chill.
well, there's that, but there's all. But what I mean is that it's a common thing on YouTube. Everybody does their like ad spot, but we have shit we have to be doing at some point, so we're sticking to the part of your video that actually is an argument.
All right. All right. Jack-o'-lanterns.
Jack-o'-lanterns.
Materials to construct that kind of story are put together very well in Agatha all along. So far, the structure of the show is sound. They did not film 6 hours of show and then arbitrarily cut it into 9 episodes, and I want to praise that specifically. TV is not doing that lately on streaming services. The 2 episodes have their own subplot that is resolved inside that episode while still moving the overall plot forward. This is great. Episode 1 gets Agatha out of her dream world.
Yeah, again, you are making a very strong argument as to why the show is not bad right now. Your only reason for assuming that it is bad, even in spite of all this, is because you, for whatever reason, don't think the show can work, but you don't actually express much as to why. The only thing you do get to later is that you think that this show will be popular with a bunch of new agey basic bitches and people who like Halloween too much, but you failed to account for the fact the show is actually releasing during Halloween season, and that means that more normies than usual will be into witchy shit for at least that month. And that's a good basis for kicking off a show like Agatha Along. Not to mention that the mystical side of the Marvel Universe, much like every other part of the Marvel Universe, has had a male audience for a jolly long time now, and those people are still interested enough in Mystic Marvel that they will come on, bring a lot of the Halloween-oriented normies with them, and it will also be popular, or can at least be popular, with said basic bitches. Your apparent assumption is that the only people the show is going for is basic bitches. And, yeah, no, I'm afraid not. That part of your video is wrong, and it is that wrong premise you appear to be erecting your entire argument on. Jack-o'-lanterns.
Introduces her former lover, Aubrey Plaza, who is playing Aubrey Plaza, just like she does in every show she's ever been in. The beginning of the first episode is the best part of the show so far because it was a crime drama spoof done masterfully. Episode 2 has her getting the band together, random characters who all need...
Okay.
Hold on, I want to bring up a few things.
Yes. Go ahead.
Again, I'm aware that he's only seen the first 2 in this video.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to bring up anything like that. One, Aubrey Plaza's really good. I've seen her and everything. And yeah, maybe she does play herself, but she's still fucking good.
Yeah. And to his credit, this guy does admit that.
I'm just saying, like, I don't know. I'm going to be honest, man. I don't like this guy.
I don't really have any strong opinions on him one way or the other. I like a lot of his videos. I obviously disliked and disagreed with this one. One thing I will say I fundamentally disagree with him on is that episode 1 was the strongest so far because it was a crime drama spoof. Because I, for one, didn't want a crime drama spoof. And I actually thought that episode 1 was one of the weaker episodes of this show, specifically because it spent about 2/3 of its time doing a crime drama spoof when it should have been establishing stuff that it establishes in the last 10 minutes. But
they're weird. Let's be honest.
Yes, I am aware of that. My point is that the point I disagree with him on is his reasoning. He said, and I quote, "It was the best episode so far because it was a crime drama spoof," meaning that he thinks a crime drama spoof is more valid than a spooky Halloween show about witches. Which, no. And first of all, no. Second of all, because the show releases around and during Halloween, people want to see a show about witches, especially when the main character is already established to be a witch. So he seems to be making the argument that crime drama spoofs are more likable or more interesting or something than witch shows by definition, and that's false, especially if the show is marketed as a witchy show, which it was, and is releasing during Hallow-freaking-Ween and or October, which it is. Anyway, jack-o'-lanterns.
Something, so they can't refuse her offer. They don't trust each other, and they're all hiding their own secrets. But their greed for the goal overcomes their mistrust, and the danger of the dangerous, ominous somethings drives them all to jump into the plot together. Honestly, if we're just talking about the show as a formula, that formula is being well executed.
Salem 7, by the way, if you want to be a pedantic jackass about it.
Okay, yeah. As long as we're being overly pedantic here, the show doesn't introduce the Salem 7 out of nowhere. Specifically, in episode 1, after Agatha wakes up and is assaulted magically by Aubrey Plaza's character, she outlines who and what the Salem 7 are. It's not as if, and this is the thing, this again is a sign of this guy and many others on the black-pilled side of the anti-woke set wanted this show to be another Acolyte, or wanted this show to be like Velma or Rings of Power or She-Hulk or something like that. And so they're deliberately choosing not to pay fucking attention so as to make the show sound more like the Acolyte, Velma, or She-Hulk. And it isn't. The show already set up the Salem 7, what they are, and the fact that they were gunning for Agatha in the last 10 or 15 minutes of episode 1. And what you just said implies that either you weren't paying attention when they were set up, or you think that the fact that they were spooky and ominous is somehow a failing of the show in general, which again, no. In a show that's marketed based on a witch character during Hallow freaking Ween, the fact that the Salem 7 are spooky and ominous isn't a point against the show. And even if it were somehow a point against the show resolved this by setting them up an episode and a half before they show up. So the viewer is not caught off guard or confused by their existence. Jack-o'-lanterns.
So far, we know everything we need to know. We are introducing a little bit of detail into the magic system, which I like. There are apparently different types of witches in the MCU now. They do different things. Like Agatha is definitely black, but she has no swamps currently. This one right here, probably blue. This one's definitely red. They hint that Aubrey is going to be green.
Okay, and you kind of missed the point that the types of witches were associated with the elements, meaning that the potions witch is the water witch, the protection witch is fire. Agatha is not black because the only reason you would think that is because she used black magic and the Darkhold in WandaVision, but that doesn't imply that that was her original type of magic. And we know that because in the episode of WandaVision where Agatha's backstory was introduced, her coven used blue magic when they were opposing her, and she was using purple or black magic because she had already been corrupted by the Darkhold. But we can assume, because context, that her original magic color was probably blue as well. But that doesn't mean that the magic they were all using was potions magic, because, again, the show and the Witch's Road of Agatha All Along specify that there are elemental associations with each of the, sub-disciplines of magic. Which, again, this might be a sign that you are not paying attention, which I guess can be kind of an argument in that it didn't draw you enough in for you to pay attention. But the confusion that results from your lack of ability to pay attention is not a fault with the show, is a fault with you for refusing to pay attention. Moving on. Jack-o'-lanterns.
So she'll be bringing huge creatures who can trample, and it'll be a great addition to the coven since she can make her permanents hexproof. I'm cool with this if they actually put in some rules and details, because I'm a fan of a hard magic system, and thus far the magic in Marvel has just been a plot device. Like Wanda has the power of red. It does
Chaos magic.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to be a pedantic asshole, but I'm gonna be because, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, so to speak. They actually do outline what Wanda's powers do in WandaVision, because Agatha basically spends like the first half of episode 8 of WandaVision explaining to Wanda how witchcraft works or how their particular version of magic works. And she also explains, and I will quote, at the end of episode 8, when she figures out that Wanda is the Scarlet Witch, that, quote, "You're supposed to be a myth, a being capable of spontaneous creation. Your children vision this whole life you've made. It's chaos magic, Wanda, and that makes you the Scarlet Witch." So what we can gather is that there is some standardization, at least among witches, as to what they can do. Specifically, the 3 things, or actually 4 things, that Agatha shows Wanda in episode 8 of WandaVision are mind control, with the use of the spell Henio Imperium Aninhi, transmutation or illusion casting, which she demonstrates for us by transforming a beetle into a bird and then having her rabbit-shaped familiar eat it, with the use of the spell Rifimetor Figora, the creation of runes for protection, which we don't get the actual incantation for, but we are shown that you can cast runes and that those runes will sanctify an internal space so that only the witch who casts them can use the magic. There is memory retrieval, or possibly another form of illusion casting using the spell the spell for the memory spell was Mimete in Memoria. But we know that witchcraft can create illusions and or transmutations. It can control minds, and it can create illusory constructs for the sake of like memory retrieval and shit. We also see some teleportation, we also see some telekinesis, etc. Which is all shit that we also got a tour of throughout all of WandaVision, because Wanda has the power to use the skills of witchcraft without actually knowing how to use them, because she doesn't require a coven or incantations to use her magic, which again is something that we learn from Agatha, because Agatha actually knows enough about the Scarlet Witch and the Darkhold to explain these things to Wanda, which also has the benefit of explaining them to us. And I agree with you. Hard magic systems are better. Full stop. Both for accuracy reasons and for, like, lore mechanics reasons. But don't act like we haven't gotten at least some of that from Agatha. Granted, we should have gotten more of it from the Ancient One, and we didn't, and that sucks. So I agree with you that they need to fill the viewers in on how the fuck this shit works. It's almost like they have a good reason to make a show based on a bunch of witch characters so that we can then explore that magic system in greater detail without drowning the audience in exposition. But that would mean that the show actually has a valid reason to exist, and your entire premise appears to be that it doesn't. Jack-o'-lanterns.
This framework is put together soundly. We have a good structure. This hunk of metal is polished fairly well. Catherine Hahn is the gem, glued to the end, doing a great job. But this isn't a solid bar stool for your kitchen. This isn't a sturdy breaker bar that will resist bending when those caliper bolts are being really stupid.
I'm gonna let him finish the sentence before I respond. Jack-o'-lanterns.
This isn't a high-quality watch like the one that I bought when I was young, but I don't wear anymore. It's not a Volvo car frame that will crash test well. I said crystal earlier, right? It's not a high-quality fruit bowl that you're going to display for your guests or something. This particular product is designed to...
Okay, and again, I understand your metaphor,
Hold on,
but
he's
I
not
don't.
done.
Okay, but yeah, jack-o'-lanterns.
Be shoved up your butt. And no matter how well the information is delivered, no matter how well Catherine Hahn acts, no matter how touchingly this squad of rapscallions becomes a found family after discovering the power of cooperation, this show is still designed to be shoved up your butt. And it won't matter what raw materials it has or how they were put together. The details.
Okay, you actually finished the sentence there, so I'm actually going to respond now. I understand your metaphor, and your way of going into detail on that metaphor was quite humorous. I laughed the first time I watched this. But here's the thing. And again, this is a very crucial question I'm about to ask you. I understand that you're using that metaphor, but would you care to explain to me how that metaphor is applicable in any way? You opened the video saying that Agatha all along was a Tiffany Crystal butt plug, and you spent the intermediary period explaining the good qualities of the show that are analogous to the crystal and the good materials and the good structure and everything, which is fair enough. And I do agree with you. All those good qualities are in fact there, in my opinion, with the one exception of episode 6, which was absolutely dog shit. But that's neither here nor there. But here's the very crucial and instructive and substantive difference now. You explained the good properties of the show, and you explained that you see the show as a waste of good materials because you assume that it is a butt plug. But you have not gone into any detail whatsoever as to why that metaphor is applicable in the goddamn first place. You haven't explained the negative side of your criticism here. All you've done so far is expound a bunch of ways in which the show is good, which I agree with. But your entire premise is that despite these good qualities and this good structure, they are using these resources wrong, and that makes the show bad, or that it's being used for a bad purpose, and that will end up making the show bad. But you haven't explained dog shit about how and why you came to that conclusion in the first place. All you've done is poison the well against the show by calling it a butt plug, then giving the show a bunch of compliments that are applicable, and then just taking your own metaphor as its own proof in a circular fashion. And there is no basis for that. There certainly was definitely no basis for that in this video of all videos, because as far as you are concerned, sir, you only watched the 2-part pilot, the first 2 episodes. And there was nothing egregiously wrong or bad about those first 2 episodes. If we were talking about the show after episode 6 had aired, which is genuinely a piece of shit episode, then maybe I could see where you were coming from. But you didn't have access to those 6 episodes when you made this. You were referring to a pretty solid 2-part pilot when you made this. So where comes the butt plug part of this equation? When does your metaphor for its negative properties become applicable or substantive or founded on anything, please? Jack-o'-lanterns.
Inside that framework are simply not going to appeal to, I think, a pretty large portion of the audience. They're just not about that life. After 2 episodes, I was able to admire the craftsmanship, but I have zero desire to use this show in the way that it's intended.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, of course not.
I mean, it's fine.
Okay. And this is why I keep bringing up the fact that Marvel was smart enough to release this during Halloween. Because this actually does basically refute your only attempt at a pseudo-criticism, which is you don't think this show has a large audience, and you don't think it's going to have a large amount of appeal. If this show had been released during the summer, I could see where you're coming from. Or if this show was released during the spring, I could see where you were coming from. But Marvel actually did their legwork this time and were smart enough to put this show during the end of September through the end of October. The season finale, the 2-part season finale of this show actually is airing on Wednesday, October the 31st, i.e., it is airing on Halloween night. That is a perfect place to put a show like this. And as a result of them being smart enough to air this during Halloween, quite a lot of normies who normally wouldn't be, quote-unquote, about witch vibes or about spookiness are looking for something that scratches that Halloween itch. And as a result, not only are you going to wind up with all the Fluffy Bunny coffee shop Wiccan types and the actual practitioners and or nerds of things magical within fiction, like myself, but you're also going to get a bunch of people who are looking for a show that is applicable to that Halloween vibe, liked Agatha to begin with because she was the only likable part of WandaVision when all was said and done, were familiar enough with WandaVision because, again, back before WandaVision ended, the MCU shows didn't have a negative reputation yet, and most of the reputation it would have shared, it shared with most of Phase 3 rather than Phase 4 because it was the start of Phase 4. Now, if a bunch of people, normies and non-normies, come in during Halloween season looking for something with spooky vibes, then Marvel's Agatha All Along will oblige them, and to your own admission, will do so with a bunch of positive materials and or good structure. That's why I'm saying most of your negative criticism here is the niche of this show is too small. How dare they make it? It's not going to have a large enough audience to recoup its losses back. Can be refuted by the fact that Marvel was smart enough to release it during Halloween. And once you do that, or rather once I did that after watching this video the first time, I realized that you literally have no other leg to stand on. You keep insinuating and assuming that it's a butt plug, but you explain nothing about how or why it is. Jack-o'-lanterns.
Then we're gonna do one more minute and call it.
Okay, and we'll finish this one next week.
If that's who you are.
Absolutely.
This show has a very niche audience, and that is middle-aged.
This Charmin Ultra Soft.
Freaking YouTube ads. We will wait until the YouTube ad has elapsed. And then we will do one more minute, and then we will save the rest for next week.
There we go.
Okay. Jack-o'-lanterns.
It's fine if that's who you are.
Absolutely.
This show has a very niche audience, and that is middle-aged white women who live in California, spend a lot of time surfing book talk for their next spicy read, and wish that they could be cool and witchy, so they are way too into Halloween. These women go to Mexican restaurants to order a chicken quesadilla every
Hey, Don.
Yep.
How you feel about that?
I am profoundly infuriated by it, but I will frame it in terms of rational arguments. I
So what
don't
the fuck-
dis-
I'm sorry. It's just like, what the fuck is wrong with chicken quesadillas? I love chicken quesadillas. Speaking as a Mexican dude, like, what the fuck?
because it's something that posh hipsters like, and that's the connection he's trying to make here. I don't dispute that that will be a portion of Agatha All Along's audience. It would be a farcical statement to assume that none of such people were in Agatha All Along's audience. My issue is you seem to, like, your insinuation is that those are the only people capable of liking Agatha All Along, or that only such people will be drawn to watch Agatha All Along. And that's not true. And this is why I mentioned earlier on in the video that there is already a supernatural, mystical, or like Halloween-esque corner of the Marvel Universe. Things like Ghost Rider, things like Doctor Strange, things like Werewolf by Night, things like Encounter the Living Mummy, Damien Hellstrom, so on and so on and so on and so on. Sorry, my phone is giving me the you have 10 minutes remaining thing, and I had to plug it in again. But yeah, Marvel has always had a horror-based or horror-adjacent or mystical or supernatural-based corner of the Marvel Universe, and it's apparently not a very niche audience because Doctor Strange 1 made 677 million worldwide. Doctor Strange 2 made almost $1 billion, and the only reason why it didn't make $1 billion was because it was missing about 50 million that it normally would have gotten from China had China agreed to release the movie. And again, characters like Wong or characters like Doctor Strange are extremely well-liked characters in the MCU, not to mention in the original comics context. And given that, the fact that there is a male audience, because we all know that comic books are a mostly male hobby, not saying entirely male, but mostly male, that point we can agree on. Comics usually have a male audience, or primarily a male audience. But within that mostly male audience, there are enough people who like witchy and or supernatural and or mystical shit that Marvel has an entire corner thereof in its publication history. A thing which has been adapted at least somewhat into the MCU. And once again, you seem to be unaware or unable to comprehend the positive benefit to Agatha All Along it is to release during late September through October. Because that is spooky season. And by the way, just because hipstery white bitches get way too into Halloween, and I, again, don't dispute that such people exist, doesn't mean that they're the only people looking for something vaguely spooky and witchy during Halloween season. And that's why, between the already pre-established nature of Agatha, the already pre-established nature of Mystic Marvel in the movies and or shows, and the fucking stroke of marketing genius, or what should be marketing common sense, but isn't because so many studios don't release spooky shit for Halloween for whatever reason. Because Marvel did the smart thing and released the show during Halloween, a lot of normies who would otherwise not be into this sort of thing are going to get into that sort of thing, especially if the writing quality is good, which it is, the structure is good, which you've already admitted to, and all the raw materials of it make perfect sense and work well together. So you keep insinuating that this show is a butt plug for whatever reason, but that seems to be because you chose to take a blown glass pumpkin decoration for Halloween and shove it up your own ass for no real reason, to stay within your metaphor, sir. You're using something as a butt plug, and you didn't realize that it wasn't supposed to be a butt plug, I guess. To meet your own metaphor where it lives. Jack-o'-lanterns.
Time and say out loud, I want to be a little naughty as they order a margarita. basic bitches is what I'm saying. Older basic bitches. These are the women. This is why we call this Han Solo season. Once again, we have a tiny audience that a massive brand is trying to serve, but not outside.
And again, I don't dispute that such people are a part of Agatha All Along's audience. It would be silly to claim otherwise. But one, I don't think that it is the main audience they're going for. And two, even if that were the case, the fact that they're releasing this show with the aforementioned good materials and good properties that you yourself admitted that it has during Halloween season means that even if somehow they were the main audience for this show, which again I don't think so, I think the main audience for it are people who thought that Agatha was the coolest character in WandaVision, people who like Mystic Marvel, people who are looking for a spooky witchy show that's actually new and different during Halloween season, and people who can be persuaded to like witchy shit at least during Halloween. And also, I want to point this out as well. Just because the show has a bunch of cast members in it that are older witchy women doesn't mean that that is their target audience. And honestly, the reason I point that out is that's the kind of fallacy that we used to criticize the SJWs and or the woke for. The assumption that you can only relate to characters who look, act, and think like you. That's the kind of shit that we used to in like 2016 and 2017 criticize the woke for, because it demonstrated how narcissistic they were being by saying that they can only relate to people who look, act, and think like them. And yet you are straight up committing that same fallacy here, and you're doing it unironically. You assume that because Catherine Hahn is a witchy woman in her 50s, and Patti LuPone is likewise, and girl who plays Jen and girl who plays Alice are at least adjacent to that age as well, that therefore that's the person that the show is trying to appeal to, and moreover, because your argument is that this is the only people who will show up for this show, you also seem to be committing the fallacy that the SJWs normally do, that not only are they capable of appealing to that demographic, but that they're actually only able to appeal to that demographic. And it was just as wrong when the SJWs said, I can't relate to all these white men, as it is to sit here and listen to you saying, because this show features a cast of mostly older witchy women, that's the only people it will ever appeal to, is just as bullshit, sir. You're committing the same fallacy we used to mock and belittle the SJWs and woke scolds for doing, and you're doing it literally unironically. You have become the very thing that we used to try to fight, sir. Jack-o'-lanterns.
One sec.
The main brand. And that's going to be nearly impossible to mix together. If they genuinely are trying to do the Young Avengers, which they've already introduced 3 of the girls, and they want to flip the script so that it's 5 girls and 1 boy this time, definitely going to be Wiccan as the guy. He is the perfect subversion of the original Avengers because he is the most feminine.
Okay, I agree with you. The Young Avengers concept they appear to be setting up for phases 6 and 7 is dumb. But does the fact that they might use this character in a stupid or subversive way later mean that they're necessarily doing that now? Or that the show is in some way diminished by that character's addition? The answer, of course, is no. The character is, with the exception of episode 6, because, again, I don't want... I like Agatha all along. I am very supportive of Agatha all along because I think that it is good. But that does not mean that I can't acknowledge that episodes 1 and 4 are weaker than episodes 2, 3, and 5. And it doesn't mean that I can't acknowledge the fact that episode 6 is absolute dog shit. But you didn't have that information when you made this video. You saw the 2-part pilot, and you are making these assumptions based solely on the 2-part pilot. And while I would agree with you that episode 6 massively let down and injured the quality of this show, prior to episode 6, Agatha all along was on like the high side of good, or at least the mid side of good. And most people who were watching Agatha all along included not only the aforementioned basic white bitches, but also people who wanted a cool, interesting new witchy show. Because the irony is that a lot of the time during Halloween, we default back to the same old traditional stuff over and over again, which isn't bad necessarily. But one thing Agatha has going for it is there are a lot of people who like the classic Halloween movies that they like Nightmare Before Christmas, Paranorman, Coraline, Hocus Pocus, the Halloween Town movies, and so on. But as much as people like those like classic mainstays of Halloween, they do actually like seeing new Halloween adjacent witchy shit when new things can happen. And Agatha all along is in the position to take advantage of the fact that while people love those classics, they wouldn't mind getting new additional Halloween classics. And episode 6 notwithstanding, definitely episode 6 notwithstanding, the first 5 episodes of Agatha all along, not only are they good, I think this show might wind up having a Halloween classic fan base to it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if come this time next year, people are rewatching Agatha all along, because the show actually, episode 6 very much notwithstanding, the first 5 episodes of that show are really freaking good, especially for spooky season and your Halloween adjacent witchy vibes. And the writing, the structure, the effort, and the materials, as you yourself just admitted, are pretty freaking solid for that. Anyway, jack-o'-lanterns.
No, that was it.
Okay.
All right, last thing then. So I had recently come across this like in the last few days. So there's something on Kickstarter. I'm not saying support it if you want to. I'm just something that is topical, but also just something fun.
Yeah, we like to spotlight Kickstarter, so I guess I should say Brainstormer likes to cite Kickstarters a lot, and I usually just let him do it because he's good at finding the positive things that we usually end on.
Mm-hmm. So this is the Mobster Mash. It's issue 1. Basically, it's taking the Universal monsters and making them like, well, gangsters, and I think it's supposed to be like Prohibition.
I think this has a similar premise to the old, like, you remember, like, around 2016 or 2017 when DC did that crossover with Looney Tunes and Hanna-Barbera?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what we're doing here, except for Looney Tunes reads Universal Horror Monsters.
Right. So Mobster Mash is a limited series crime noir comic set in a fictionalized 1940s Los Angeles, where the classic Hollywood monsters of old are all mobsters in a growing turf war over Tinseltown.
Okay, that's interesting. Kind of blending the movies themselves with like the actual history of the horror movie boom that happened in like the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Yeah.
That's actually really neat. It's almost like doing the horror movie equivalent of like La La Land almost. That's cool.
I also like the art. Like this is the first like cover A, and I like the designs for them because like you could tell who's who. Obviously, it's not
Yeah,
hard.
it's very easy to see who is the translation of which character.
Yeah, but it's also like the designs are just wholly their own. Like they're individuals. You know, there's no uniformity really. I mean, the suits, sure, but
Yeah, but each person's aesthetic is so unique to them that you can tell who's supposed to be who.
Yeah.
It's also giving me like really cool pulp vibes, and you know how much I love my like pulp noir vibes.
yeah. Each issue, which will be a 12-issue miniseries, is 22 pages long in full color and 6 pages of extra content. Making each
I will probably wait until they decide to release this as a omnibus or trade, because I prefer reading from trades where I can. But I hope this does well enough that it does become feasible to do like an omnibus or trade.
So it has 28 pages total. It's printed on high quality 130 GSM silk with a 170 GSM silk cover.
Okay, again, I hope this does enough gangbusters that they'll decide to do like another Kickstarter for like a trade or omnibus format, or how it might be an actual stretch goal for their Kickstarter that if they make enough money, they'll do it in like a hardcover omnibus format. Because I would totally like that. I prefer to get my comics, especially if I'm going to be reading them, in trade and omnibus format.
Yeah, they say it's going to be a full color, but I like the black and white too because it's just so detailed and.
Yeah, I don't hate the black and white, although I am glad they're doing color. And presumably the color scheme is gonna be very like Halloweeny, for lack of a better term.
All right, so the team behind this, Will Robson, sorry. So creator of Monster Mash, Outbreaks. He was an artist on Spawn, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Peter Porker, The Spectacular Spider-Ham, Batman: Urban Legends, and The Flash.
Okay, so this guy definitely has the artistic skills to pay the bills, so to speak, and he's actually also one of the type of people who you'd want to get on a premise like this, because Spawn and TMNT particularly are very much the let's take something like dark and gothic and supernatural and turn it into like a superhero format.
Yeah. Will Robson, writer and creator of Mobster Mash. Will is a professional comic book writer and artist who has worked on Batman, Star Wars, Spider-Man and Deadpool, The Fantastic Four, Spawn, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and many more awesome titles, including his other successful creator-owned series, Outbreaks. Will writes, pencils, inks, and letters all of Mobster Mash.
I think I've heard of Outbreaks. I don't know much about it, but I think I've heard of it.
Andrew Dollhouse, colorist, Mobster Mash, Black Panther, Batman, Spawn, The Flash, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Justice League, Vampirella.
Okay, again, that's the Vampirella particularly is what's drawing my attention here, because while you don't necessarily need to have a type to do stuff like this, the fact that this person has previous experience with like supernatural Halloween based material is definitely like for example, I'm not saying there's no one who could do a live action Nightmare Before Christmas better than Michael Dougherty, but given that Michael Dougherty has a history of use of a mixture of practical and visual effects with things like Krampus and Trick or Treat and Godzilla King of Monsters, and he's done both Halloween and Christmas stuff in the form of Trick or Treat and Krampus. I'm gonna give Michael Dougherty a call if Disney ever asks me who should make a live action version of Nightmare Before Christmas, because you basically just take Krampus and take
Okay.
Trick or Treat and combine them. Anyway, moving on.
Meet Andrew Dahlhaus, colorist of Mobster Mash. He's a professional comic book colorist who's worked with Will on many characters over the years, including Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Vampirella, Red Sonja, Batman, Doctor Doom, and many more. Besides his team ups with Will, he's colored some of the biggest names in comics like Brett Booth, V.K. Marion, and Freddie Williams.
Okay, so not only are both of them familiar with this kind of material, they've worked together before. That is also a very good sign.
All right. Des Taylor, variant cover artist for Mobster Mash. He's a pop art and comic book illustrator who's drawn covers for DC Bombshells, Doctor Who, Archie Comics, Star Trek, as well as producing his creator-owned comic books, Scarlet KOTOR, the Vesha Valentine story, The Trouble with Katie Rogers, and his latest book, EVA Strongbird and the Marine, with Disney artist Rob Pratt.
Okay, this is a minor criticism. This is me nitpicking the shit out of something that I genuinely just don't like. I hate the existence of variant covers. And I always have. Because in my head, the best cover for the book should go on the book, full stop. You shouldn't create like tiered examples of different qualities of cover. But again, this is nothing against him. It's just something I have against variant covers. Because in a world that was sane, the best cover for the book would go on all the books. You wouldn't have this tiered threshold nonsense. And I hate what the industry has become as a result of variant covers. Anyway, moving on.
All right. Here's everything we are offering for this campaign. We need your help to make this comic reality. And it looks like they're doing pounds, which I find interesting.
Well, if they're in England, and I think these are guys who are like, they came into the industry around the time of the British invasion, so that does make sense.
No, they're not that old, I don't think. I think they're American, actually, or one of them is, two of them are.
Then yeah, then doing pounds is weird.
Your name in print. Your name will be printed in the special thanks section inside the comic. That is if you just 3 pounds. Mobster 5 pounds. Mobster Mash #1 digital PDF copy sent directly to your email of choice. 10 pounds. Speech Comics digital combo pack. Every speech title. Get PDF copies of Mobster Mash #1 and Outbreaks #1 to 3. Then Mobster Mash #1 for 10 pounds. Print and digital cover A. Covered by Will Robson, including digital PDF version along with having your name in the special thanks section. Then the blank sketch cover. Draw on it yourself or get Will to draw a sketch on it. Sketch by Will available at higher reward tiers.
Neat.
12 pounds. Mobster Mash #1 print and digital cover C. Todd McFarlane homage, drawn by Will Robson as an homage to Todd McFarlane's cover of Hulk 345.
Okay, that sounds awesome, honestly.
Yeah. And then Mobster Mash #1 at 13 pounds. That's print and a digital cover D. Des will be doing a variant cover for every future issue of Mobster Mash. Mobster Mash print 14 pounds. Texas cover. And then a Scarface homage for a digital cover. which is cool.
Yeah, that sounds kind of awesome.
20 pounds collector's bundle includes signed certificate of authenticity, bookmark, sticker, and collectible trading card.
Okay, that sounds cool.
And then a black and white cover, only 25 ever printed and will never be printed again at 25 pounds.
Interesting. So
Or-
for those who only speak in American units, that's about $30.
Hmm.
Because
sorry.
the pound is slightly more solid than the dollar, so a pound is about $1.50 or $1.75.
25 pounds, day one backers only, includes signed Kickstarter exclusive deluxe cover plus goodies shown. Then 30 pounds, Monster Mash #1 deluxe edition. Comes with a shiny rainbow foil cover and includes extra pages of content.
Also cool.
Yeah. Mystery bundle pack. 35 pounds, 2 signed random Mobster Mash covers, a signed Marvel and DC Robson comic, and 2 shiny cards.
Mm-hmm.
35 pounds, Beach Comics print and digital combo pack. Mobster Mash #1 and Outbreaks 1 to 3 bundled together. 40 pounds, collector's bundle signed by Will Robson. Includes signed certificate of authenticity, bookmark, sticker, and collectible trading card. Yeah. All right. Signed speech. Des Taylor fan pack signed by Des and Will, includes print. Certificate of authenticity signed by Des and Will, the exclusive Des trading card, and Des bookmark.
Hoping there's an omnibus format in one of these tiers.
I'm almost there. Monster Mash #1 Remarque. Hand-drawn art. Have Will Robson draw a character on the comic from the comic right on the comic, also available as an add-on.
Interesting.
Monster Mash #1 complete bundle. That's 100 pounds. Every issue 1 cover includes the Kickstarter exclusive deluxe cover. Then 125. That's every cover signed with a certificate of authenticity. Penultimate bundle for 150 pounds. All covers signed with certificates of authenticity. Des Taylor fan pack plus all the extra goodies. Sketch cover, original art drawn by Will. Get a character from the book drawn by the series artist Will Robson. Sketch cover bundle, original art and all the extras. That's 200 pounds. Then ultimate bundle, everything for 250 pounds.
So no omnibus format in the works as yet.
Well, to be fair, they're only doing issue 1 right now, which I think is kind of smart given the fact that you just want to make sure that there's interest in it.
Yeah, as long as there is an actual audience, there will be time to do prestige formats and stuff later.
Yeah. These items are available. Okay, so add-ons items are available to anyone who wants extra goodies or extra copies. Once you choose your pledge level, you'll be able to access these bookmarks from E1 to E, from 1 pound to 3 pounds. Certificates of authenticity, trading cards, outbreaks, issues 1 to 3 available. Why we need your help? Mobster Mash can only exist with your help. We need to raise enough to be able to get the book drawn, colored, printed, and shipped. Here's a breakdown chart so you know exactly where the funds are needed. Packaging, that's 1.9%, 150 pounds. Shipping, 1,500 pounds, which is 18.8%. Colors, 1,750 £250 was 21.9%. Printing £1,300, 16.3%. Art £25,000 and 31.3%. And fees £800, 10%.
I think it's actually smart to have the like financial breakdown like that. That's actually a good idea.
How long we estimate it'll take to get the book in your hands? The schedule for it. January, online art completed. February, all colors completed and sent to print. March, all rewards shipped. After 3 successful campaigns from our other comic outbreaks, we've always delivered.
Again, I think it's also smart for them to like specify what when that people are actually gonna get their stuff, because people know me well enough, probably know that I don't like EVS all that much. And one of the reasons why he is a scumbag is he will basically tell you the book will be ready whenever the book is ready, and leave people basically high and dry, whether they're ever actually going to get their shit or not.
Right. So thank you for taking a look at our campaign. We'll hope you come and do the Mobster Mash. Risk and challenges. The book could be delayed a month or so due to artist schedules, but we've yet to miss a deadline after 3 successful campaigns.
Again, it is a very good idea to specify stuff like that, and I probably will not support this one because there is no omnibus format. I will come back as and when there is an omnibus format. But I hope that the book does well regardless. And I would obviously support if I had disposable income. I don't, however, have disposable income because the economy is shite. So there's that.
Okay, I'm gonna propose just because like it's still a little bit early, and I'll be honest, I kind of want to wait. Talk about the thing I had mentioned before stream.
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna pull that up. Yeah, just give me a minute to do that. Okay. So I had this literally just came out today, and I had sent it and fully intended to do it, next week, but since we still kind of have the time here, and it's very topical.
Mhm.
The official trailer for Creature Commandos.
Mhm.
Also, I just realized that they're using the classic DC logo for the studios
They
here.
are. Mm-hmm.
I just never realized that before.
Well, they kind of go back and forth as to which version of the DC logo they use. I do like this one though.
Oh yeah, it's got a lot more character to it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say,
didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just gonna say, like, it's like, I don't know. I kind of remember because okay, I think Dawn might remember this logo more so than me, given our age difference.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing this once or twice, like on some really old comics I found.
I've seen I've also seen a lot of DC logos that existed before this one. Because I am as most people know, my two vectors of interest are like Golden Age or like pulp era and mystical shit. So I think I've seen every DC DC Comics cover or logo at one point or another. But yeah, this was the one that was still in use when I was kind of coming up as a kid.
All right.
And I remember when they changed this one for the blue and black DC cover or logo. And yeah, while I don't have anything against that logo, I do definitely miss this one. So it's nice to see it come back.
Jack-o'-lanterns.
Jack-o'-lanterns.
General Flag, you found yourself in the middle of an international incident.
Oh, princess.
There's Cersei.
The United
Mhm.
States is in the business of saving the damn world by any means necessary.
What in the holy hell?
I mean, obviously, I would dispute that line, but it is a perfectly reasonable line for Amanda Waller to use. So, while I dispute it in terms of its factual accuracy, I don't dispute it as a thing that should be coming out of Amanda Waller's mouth.
Art style great, animation looks good. I honestly, I'm just loving like the detail of everything. I'm so kind of sick of the bland and simplistic art styles we've seen in animation relative like animated shows in recent years.
And the thing I also like about this is I can't wait to see these designs deployed in live action as well, because
Yeah.
that is a thing that James Gunn, whose name I spontaneously forgot for a second there, that James Gunn has said is that everything that is in animated form will eventually probably show up in live action, and that's nice.
Yeah. I mean, we already saw Frank Grillo, who's voicing General Flag, like Rick Flag Sr., show up in behind the scenes stuff for Superman.
Mhm.
So
Though that does kind of it maybe not a red flag, but it is an orange flag for me. I hope that they don't overstuff Superman, because the reason I worry about that, and I've gone over this a couple of times, is because a couple of years ago someone asked James Gunn what he would do with a Superman movie, and he said he doesn't know how he would do it because he doesn't like or understand Superman. And while that seems to have become less true after he got the assignment, I do somewhat worry that his solution to not liking Superman will be overstuffing the Superman movie so he doesn't have to deal with the character as much. Especially because James Gunn also has a habit of doing team movies. And
Right.
while that works for, premises that lend themselves well to a team up movie, doesn't do it. It's not exactly a good sign for a solo movie.
right, hold on. I just want to get a closer look at Cersei. Again, this all looks really good.
It does.
All right, here
I am somewhat partial to the design of Cersei from the Justice League Unlimited episode where Wonder Woman was transformed into a pig. The Batman Sings episode, as most people probably remember it.
I do like the design. It kind of does fit Cersei. From what I
It
remember.
does. Yeah, and I can see where this is going vis-a-vis live action, which should be interesting.
Also, okay,
Um,
I didn't want to bring this up, but I feel like I kind of have to.
Mm-hmm.
The women look like women.
They do.
I'm sorry, I don't mean
Yeah.
to bring it up. I don't like bringing it up, but just
Yeah,
given
in modern day media, the idea of women having beauty standards has become unfashionable. So it's nice that James Gunn appears not to be falling for that social justice nonsense. Anyway,
Oh,
shall we jack-o'-lantern?
yeah. All right. Yep. Jack-o'-lantern.
Congress said we can't use human prisoners. These assholes aren't human.
Do you understand me now?
Who is she? We call her the bride.
I was born here.
Who's Jake?
Yeah, again, like you get a feeling for all this shit, and it's good, you know.
Also, for those playing the James Gunn drinking game at home, take your shot for the retro 80s/70s music till.
Yeah, I was gonna
there.
say, like, I kind of get like a weird, like, kind of grindhouse kind of feel from like how everything is made to look.
I mean, again, this is definitely within James Gunn's wheelhouse. It's a teen movie, and it's about weird
not a movie.
characters.
Not a
Or
movie.
show. Yeah, but sorry. Yeah, it's a team up show with weird, hyper colorful characters. So
That are also
I'm not.
probably incredibly trauma ridden.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised that James Gunn appears to be acing this, considering this is his niche. Again, that's why I'm slightly more skeptical of Superman than I would like to be, because I get the worst feeling that he might resolve his refusal to deal with Superman by turning it into a teen movie for no good reason. And
Alright.
that does bother me a little bit.
Yeah, they all. Also, I love how distinct all the characters are.
Yeah. And again, I can easily see most of these working well in live action as well, which is nice.
Yeah. Okay, it's gonna be a weird thing, but I don't know if anyone here has seen the old Adult Swim animation, Black Dynamite.
I have, yes.
Really?
I've seen a lot of animation with regards to Adult Swim.
It never really, like, as far as I've known you, I wouldn't expect you to know that or watch that.
It was on, and it's geeky enough, I guess.
Well,
I-
the art style was kind of reminding me of Black Dynamite, you know.
Yeah, I can see where you're going with this.
I don't really have anything else to say.
Yeah, jack-o'-lanterns.
Jack-o'-lanterns.
Jason and the Argonauts.
It's Dr. Phosphorus.
Why are you doing this?
It's business.
Sometimes I feel a little bad.
What is that then?
The weasel. We know it has what it takes to survive. That's Nina Mazursky. Last one.
And these are all cool characters, man. Like,
Yep. Again, this is at the dead center of James Gunn's wheelhouse, so I'm not surprised he's acing it.
yeah. I am curious how they would translate Dr. Phosphorus to live action, just because he's a glowing radioactive skeleton.
I mean, Zack Snyder was able to do Dr. Manhattan like what 10, 15 years ago, so I'm sure they could do Dr.
He was-
Phosphorus now.
I don't know if it was 2005 or 2006, maybe 7. I'm not.
Yeah, but in the late aughts, in the late 2000s, they were able to successfully do Dr. Manhattan, and Dr. Manhattan was prior to that viewed as almost unfilmable. So if they can do a full CGI character like Dr. Manhattan 10 or 15 years ago, they could easily do Dr. Phosphorus now. And
Alright,
again, James is really good at using creative CGI, so I'm sure he'll do fine.
fair enough. All right.
Jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah, I don't know why I was forgetting that.
Is G.I. Robot.
Cheers to the Tin Man.
I know you all aren't exactly enthusiastic about this mission.
I didn't realize I had a choice.
You said you wanted me to be a hero.
Again, I'm not criticizing it on the basis of this is definitely something Amanda Waller would say, but my reaction to her saying something like, "I know you're not all, I
No,
know you're all
wasn't,
not."
that wasn't her. That wasn't Waller. That was Flag.
But point being, maybe instead of constricting people who don't want to do the thing, you should just find some people who want to do the thing. Is it impossible to find people who would actually willingly sign up for shit like this?
I'm not gonna. I don't know.
Because for some reason, Waller just goes to, let's find some human guinea pigs that I can send off to explode, instead of getting people who would like to do the thing I want them to do. Seems like a very counterintuitive thing to do, especially when you need, morale in such teams.
Kelly?
Yeah. Jack-o'-lantern.
Not like that.
With a joy that's hard to hide.
Until we find out the truth of what's going on here. We're supposed to be on the same damn team.
G.I.
Friend Nina. And you're bound to see my other side.
Shish kebab.
I'm just a soul.
Well, Alan Tudyk's always a win, so.
Mm-hmm.
And him playing
Except in Wish. Not even he could say a bad thing.
I'm still gonna say he's always a win.
Fair enough. I'm certainly not blaming him for what was wrong with Wish. It's just that is a counterexample to the potential rule here. But jack-o'-lanterns.
Whose intentions are good.
You're always so hyperbolically violent. You need therapy.
Hold on, please don't let me. Hold on, please don't let me. Please don't let me. Please don't let me.
You wanted monsters.
Don't let me.
You got monsters.
Don't let me.
One small potential criticism here, and I know it's not coming out until when is the show actually coming out? I forget. Is it December?
Hold on. December 5th.
Okay. So, I know that you can't really rely on Halloween theming for this, but I will deduct at least half a point on the basis of you could have used Monster Mash and you did not. So
Really?
suboptimal song use.
Really?
Yes. Because some answers were goddamn correct, goddammit. I'm not gonna pretend like the correct answer isn't the correct answer just because reasons.
I mean, to be fair, okay, so the original Crease Commandos back in the Weird War Tales back in the 40s.
Yes.
Granted, those Crease Commandos were basically just people that were turned into monsters via scientific experiments.
Yeah.
But they were always more or less, even with like the Suicide Squad, they were always more of a commentary on war and the stuff that can happen in that, right?
Yes.
Granted, I do think obviously they are taking more inspiration from the war modern interpretations of the Creature Commandos, which actually employ actual monsters.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if James Gunn also was combining some of the weird war stuff. As well.
because for the most part, James Gunn and I seem to be cut from the same cloth, and that's what I would do.
Yeah. What I was getting at though was like the song. I don't know what song it is, to be fair, but it sounds familiar.
I've heard it before, but I can't remember what the title was.
Right. But given, what Amanda Waller had said earlier, like at the beginning of the trailer about, America having to save the world and shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think they are going to lean somewhat towards the original Creature Commandos, like, kind of thesis.
Yeah, I could definitely see some like war on terror commentary and stuff.
Right.
Or how maybe even something as topical as like Russia-Ukraine stuff.
Either way, my thing obviously being is this is kind of posed, while it does have the supernatural elements and the monsters and all that, it is very clearly posed as like one of those, like, I almost want to say kind of like First Blood a bit.
Yeah.
And if anyone's seen First Blood, I think you'll know what I mean. It's not really like an action film.
Yeah.
It actually, well, that's not really an action film, actually, now that I remember it.
Right, but I get what you're saying, and by the way, there's nothing stopping them from using the Monster Mash in the actual show at some point.
No, that's fair.
If they do, I will return that half a point that I just removed. But until I see the appropriate use of Monster Mash with this fucking premise,
I
am withholding at least 1/2 point.
In the original ending of First Blood, Rambo was supposed to kill himself.
Yes, I know. You have to keep in mind that my mom has had a massive crush on Sly Stallone. So despite my tendencies to not really give a shit about the type of movies that Sly Stallone usually appears in, I have seen an inordinate amount of Sly Stallone movies because my mom was a Stallone fangirl.
Although you gotta admit something. His early work, before he really started to become like action icon wise,
Mm-hmm.
actually a lot more deeper and a lot more like introspective and smarter.
This is true, and I'm not saying he's bad at his job. I'm just saying the main reason why I know anything about Rambo or Rocky is because my mom was, and to the best of my recollection, still is, a Sly Stallone fangirl.
Oh, she was into
Not
that.
saying she's wrong either to be such a thing, but that is the main reason why I know more about Sly Stallone movies than I probably otherwise would.
I'm just saying, like, a lot of people, like, nowadays, well, stupid people, I would say, like, normie people, kind of get this whole thing about him being, like, not past his prime, but they make fun of the accent and stuff, like the voice and all that.
Yeah,
they do that with Arnold too.
People have always done that, and people will probably always do that. Same thing with Arnie.
Yeah,
he will always be known for the Austrian accent and so on.
Right. But I'm just, I feel like there should be more respect put on like these older actors who actually are like legitimately great actors. It's just
just because they're known for kind of the 80s and 90s like overblown muscle-bound action hero persona doesn't mean they're not good actors.
Again, I will make the argument that Rambo didn't really become an action hero until
the latter movies.
Yeah. The first movie, he very much wasn't. Or
I think my favorite Sly Stallone movie, full stop, might be Demolition Man. I think that's the best movie, just by sheer quality, that he's been in.
Yeah.
That I'm excessively aware of, anyway.
And again,
and God, Demolition Man was prescient as fuck. Unfortunately.
Also, apparently, in one of the earlier drafts of the script, Sandra Bullock's character was supposed to be Sly Stallone's daughter.
I vaguely remember something along those lines, but given how the actual movie shapes up, I'm so glad they didn't keep that, because
Well, I mean, obviously, a lot of stuff would have been changed if they kept
yeah,
that.
they probably wouldn't have done the romantic angle if they had done that. I'm just saying, like, knowing the Enoch Huxley that we've gotten in the actual movie, that just kind of creeps me out. Imagining a version of that story where she's his daughter.
I'm just wondering why they cut that storyline, why they cut that idea.
Probably because they wanted to do the romantic angle. Because it was a movie, of course, made in the 90s.
Fair enough.
And
All right.
formulas be how formulas be.
All right. Jack-o'-lanterns?
Jack-o'-lanterns.
Nazi.
He's not a Nazi, GI.
Oh, okay.
I'm very curious to find out what G.I. Robot's deal is. Obviously, he's like very comedic relief here, but there has got to be something a lot deeper there because it's James Gunn.
I'm just hoping they don't do the obvious pandering to modern political bullshit thing. Because I want to like the show, and if they end up doing that, I'm going to have to not like it as much. And that makes me sad.
What's an expression for what's an expression for what's it? Fearing something. Fearing. I can't remember the expression. It's basically your. Because I'm not seeing that with the whole because he's from World War II. His whole purpose was to kill Nazis. I think again, it's like a gun trying to.
Right. I'm not saying that it's like inevitable that it's gonna ruin itself in that way or anything. Like there's nothing in this trailer that makes me think they're gonna go that way. The reason I'm worried is because so many movies have ruined themselves or weakened themselves significantly, or shows have pulled the modern day Nazis alt-right card, and while I don't see any reason why James Gunn is likely to pull that card, he might, by virtue of simply being from or living in like LA, given how many hipsters and Karens and shit there are in California, especially among the rich, affluent toff set.
All right. So with that, folks, want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, avideze, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Shalom and fuck off.